Chapter 872. Chun Zhao snapped his fingers and crooked his finger at the short guy. I'm warning you. You. The short guy didn't dare to go forward. Chun Zhao had knocked down all 5 bodyguards. He'd be asking for death if he went forward. Chun Zhao just wanted to teach the short guy a lesson. It was his fault for being so mean. They parted on good terms anyway. Chun Zhao's treatment plan was up to them whether they accepted it or not. Chun Zhao wouldn't say anything. No matter which doctor it was, the treatment and recovery time given would be much longer than the time given by Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao wouldn't kill him. He was angry, but not to the extent of killing him. You could choose not to come, but I'll make it so that you two can't even leave America. Chun Zhao sneered, hiring and ordering murder. You two will spend at least 3 years in prison. Nonsense. You're slandering us. Dominic and his manager were both anxious. So what? Chun Zhao said nonchalantly. This is America. I'm more familiar with it than you. Also, American law protects the weak. I can also add racial discrimination. Oh, California law has a very heavy punishment for racial discrimination. Chun Zhao often dealt with the police. He knew many basic laws like the back of his hand. How much do you want? Just name a price. Come here. Chun Zhao crooked his finger at the short guy. Or I'll call the police. In the end, the short guy still stood before Chun Zhao. What do you want? Chun Zhao grabbed the short guy's hair and smashed it on the glass table. Clang! The short guy fell to the ground with blood all over his head. Remember to watch your mouth next time. Chun Zhao looked at the short guy. Don't provoke people randomly in a strange place. Otherwise, I might have to find someone to collect your corpse next time. Chun Zhao turned to leave. After a few steps, he paused and looked back. Oh, my pay can't be missing a single cent. Holofin, you'd better watch your mouth next time. You almost caused me big trouble. If you continue to make enemies for me, I'll replace you. Dominic didn't dare to argue with Chun Zhao. But when it came to his agent, he didn't show any mercy at all. Holofin lowered his head, his face wrapped in gauze. He lowered his head. Although he was indignant, he didn't dare clash with Dominic Hayne. After all, he relied on Dominic Hayne for a living. Some football agents might have a dozen or more football players in their hands. There were quite a few in Holofin, but only Dominic Hayne was truly famous. If he lost Dominic Hayne, his income would drop by 95%. This was the difference between a top football player and a non-famous athlete. Give me a doctor. Hurry up. If you don't want to lose your job, find me a doctor immediately. I want the best doctor. Don't find me that kind of scoundrel again. Dominic, I've contacted a very outstanding doctor. I believe he has a way to help you stand up as soon as possible. Are they still illegal doctors? Dominic, you have to understand that if you go to a proper hospital now, your injury might be exposed and your season will be ruined. When that happens, you will lose your value. All right, but I don't want to be a hot-tempered person. Just then, Dominic's phone rang. Mr. Holofin, there's a woman outside. She says she's your doctor. Yes. Invite her in. Just then a tall, red-haired beauty walked in. Dominic's eyes lit up. Hello, beautiful lady. May I know your name and contact number? The red-haired lady glanced at Dominic casually. Rydra. Hello, Ms. Rydra. I'm Dominic Hayne. You should have heard of me. Nope. Although America was a sports country, football had always been a minority in America. The soccer stars in Europe did not receive much attention in the United States. Dominic wasn't angry with Rydra's answer. Ms. Rydra, are you interested in becoming my personal doctor? I lack a capable doctor like you by my side. Holofin glanced at Dominic. He knew that Dominic's old habits were acting up again. He couldn't walk when he saw a beautiful woman, and his injury was caused by a woman. My annual income is over $3 million. Are you sure you can afford my salary? Rydra said calmly. Dominic was speechless. He couldn't say anything else. His annual income was only 14 million euros. He couldn't spend a few $1,000,000 on a doctor. Ms. Rydra, please treat Dominic. How did you get this injury? Rydra asked. Do I have to tell you? I need to know the cause of this injury, and then I can treat it. It was exactly the same as what the Asian had said, which made Dominic and Holofin a little unhappy. Dominic told her the cause of the injury unwillingly. This is a relapse of an old injury, Ryder said. It's a muscle injury. You'll need 2 months to recover. 2 months? Impossible. The previous doctor said it would only take a month. Ryder sneered. A month? You must be joking with me. This kind of injury is a relapse of the old injury. Coupled with the serious damage to the soft tissues, 2 months is just a conservative estimate. The doctor who told you that it would only take 1 month to recover is either a liar or a mediocre doctor. Even if you go to the best hospital in America, the treatment time won't be shorter than the time I gave you. Damn, I told you that he's a liar. Holofin cursed angrily. I really shouldn't have let him go like this. Holofin only dared to make a ruckus now. If he was in front of Chen Zhao, he would probably give up on the spot. He didn't have the courage to cause trouble for Chen Zhao anymore. Ms. Rydera, is there no other way? If you can help me recover in a short time, I can double the commission. Dominic looked at Rydera eagerly. Ryder thought for a moment and said, there's a doctor in Los Angeles. He's the best in the industry. I became an illegal doctor because of his influence. If you can pay him enough, and if you can hire him, there should be hope that no one will die in front of him. Chapter 873. Chen Zhao, a Chinese, Ryder said. He's the best. Of course, he's also the most expensive. Chinese? Dominic and Holofin glanced at each other. Is it a man around 8 meters tall, with a toolbox on his shoulder? Huh? Have you seen him before? Dominic, he's the one who can recover in a month. Huh? Is it him? If it's him, I believe he can do it, Ryder said. If you haven't interacted with him, you won't be able to understand how good his medical skills are. Is he really that good? I used to be a private doctor for a rich man. My client was diagnosed by me in the hospital that he wouldn't live for more than 3 days. My client was over 80 years old, and his bodily functions had deteriorated. His internal organs had almost stopped functioning. I couldn't think of any possibility for him to survive. However, a year had passed, and he was still alive and well. Ryder said, because he met that Chinese man. Chinese seem to be good at taking care of their bodies, Dominic said. Maybe it's something he's good at. After that, I was fired by my client. However, I found a second job, also as a private doctor and health consultant. My client was a young man with congenital heart disease. Because his surgery had failed, his brain waves and heart rate had stopped. At that time, he was already covered with a sheet, but that Chinese man only took a glance and said that my client was not dead. And then, in the end, he asked for an operating theater and completed a failed surgery all by himself. It was supposed to be a surgery with 4 skilled attending cardiologists, but he completed it all by himself and saved the patient. Ryder said, later on, I also heard that he saved a vegetable who had been in a coma for 5 years. Maybe you don't understand this, but the possibility of this kind of vegetable waking up is 1%. At that time, he told the patient's family that he could wake the patient up, and he did it. Holofin and Dominic fell silent. There was regret in their eyes. I was also influenced by him. I changed from a legal doctor to an illegal one, Ryder said. Ryder said, outsiders may not know him well, but he is the best in our profession. The United States is so big. I don't believe that we can't find a better doctor than him. Maybe, but I doubt it. Ryder said, I don't understand. Since you've already found him, why do you still want to find me? Although I am very confident in my medical skills, there is still a big gap between me and him. This? Holofin hesitated for a while and said, we want to hear more answers. We want to see if there is a better treatment plan. I think you already have your answer, so you don't need me anymore. Goodbye. Dominic and Holofin didn't ask him to stay. They looked at each other. Dominic's temper flared up again. He grabbed the bottle on the table and threw it at Holofin. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have offended that Chinese. Help me think of a way. I want him to treat me. Let me think. I'll think of a way. Holofin's mind was a mess too. How about we raise the price? He might be tempted. Let's try. As long as I can stand up, I don't care how much it costs. Chun, bring some dog food when you come back. We're out of dog food again. The supermarket in town is out of stock. When Chun Zhao left Dominic's hotel, Fei Lai happened to call him. Chun Zhao found a nearby supermarket. The biggest supplier of Mountain Town supermarkets was probably dog food. There were many dogs in Mountain Town to begin with. Plus, Chun Zhao's family was a big consumer of dog food. As a result, Mountain Town supermarket was often out of stock. How did Chun Zhao sell dog food? Every time he went to the supermarket, he went straight to the pet section. Then, Princess pushed the cart, and Chun Zhao swept through the shelves again and again. After sweeping through rows of dog food, he would pull the cart to the brim. Then, Black Ma and White Ma would come and buy 10 carts of dog food every time. Generally compliant dog food, in fact, tastes very good and is very nutritious. Canines weren't the only ones who liked it. Chun Zhao's other pets liked it too. After Chun Zhao entered the supermarket, he went to the pet food section under the guidance of the salesperson and started sweeping through again. Fambus had also come to buy dog food, but when he went to the pet food section, he realized that all the dog food was gone. Raising his head, he saw a person pushing 4 carts filled with dog food. Famutus frowned. Wasn't this the Chinese man she'd met 2 days ago during the interview? Mr. Chun. Famutus called out in a testing manner. Chun Zhao turned around and realized that it was Fambus. You are? Chun Zhao couldn't remember Fambus' name immediately. Fambus, Mr. Chun. Don't you think it's rude to forget someone you've only met for 2 days? Fine, what's my name? Fambus' face darkened. Who the hell knows your name? See, as one of your interviewers, you didn't even know the interviewer's name. You're really too irresponsible. Mr. Chun, why did you buy so much dog food? I have a lot of pets. I need 2 bags of dog food too. Can I have 2? Fambus asked. What flavor do you like? Fambus clenched his fists. If he didn't really value his current job, he really wanted to beat the asterisk shoal up. Do you want this? Not this. It's too expensive. It's my treat. Chun Zhao acted as if he didn't realize his mistake and didn't care about Fambus' dark expression. He pushed the cart to the cashier. When the cashier saw the 200 kilograms of dog food, she was also dumbfounded. After leaving the cashier, Chun Zhao gave 2 bags of dog food to Fambus. No need to thank me. Chun Zhao smiled at Fambus. With a cold expression, Fambus left with the dog food. How rude. You didn't even say thank you. Fambus suddenly stopped and turned to look at Chun Zhao. If not for my job, you'd be in the hospital now. It seemed that Fambus really did need money. Otherwise, he wouldn't have swallowed his anger for his job. I think I've been a bit of a mouth lately. Chun Zhao slapped himself lightly. Fambus turned around and left coldly. As soon as he got home, his phone rang. Hello, who's this? I'm Steven. Come early tomorrow. I leave early. Chapter 874. Evan, come here. Just then, a large cat strolled out from a dark corner of the room. The cat was covered in spots and was more than 250 centimeters long. It is the largest cat on the American continent, the jaguar. Jaguars were the deadliest predators, and their diet included crocodiles. Jaguars were rarely owned by the rich in America because they were too big. Plus, cats had a habit of killing, so jaguars weren't good pets. His name was Evan, Fambus' pet. It was brought back by Famutus when he went on a mission in the Amazon forest. Back then, Evan was still a minor. Now, she was a big girl. Fambus treated Evan like his own daughter. The 3-year-old Evan was already an adult, which caused his appetite to increase. Fambus had to find a better-paying job. That way, his daughter wouldn't starve to death. He had no choice but to feed Evan with dog food. Her credit card had already been maxed out because she had been fed raw beef and lamb all this time. Of course, as long as Evan survived this month, her pressure would be relieved. A monthly salary of $15,000 was enough to support Evan's expenses. Of course, Evan was very obedient most of the time. After more than 2 years of training, Evan would at least not actively attack humans. Fambus was pouring dog food for Evan when he suddenly saw something in the corner. Fambus walked over and saw that Evan was like a child who had done something wrong, shrinking his head and not daring to look up. Seeing this, Fambus was so angry that he laughed. He didn't know if someone's pet had suffered or if Evan was too hungry. He directly brought back someone else's pet dog. Evan, I'm sorry for starving you, but we should abide by the rules, okay? Whoa. Evan lowered his head and moaned. It wasn't clear if he was admitting his mistake or responding to Fambus's reprimand. Fambus was really short on money, even though his salary was high. But to survive this month, Evan would probably go out and bring back a few more dogs. If he was found, he would probably be beaten to death. He had to think of a way. Fambus thought for a moment and had an idea. The next day, Fambus brought Evan with him. Fambus was going to take Evan to Stephen. Early in the morning, when Stephen came out and saw Evan beside Fambus, he was immediately startled. Fambus, what's going on? This is a jaguar, right? Mr. Stephen, this is Evan. I think it's not enough to protect you with just a few of us. Animals have better instincts than humans, and they can distinguish between good and bad intentions. This will be more helpful for me to protect you, so I brought him here. What you said makes sense. Stephen glanced at Evan. It won't bite, right? No. Fambus was very confident, but it came out early today. It hasn't had breakfast yet. It just so happens that I have a lot of raw meat in my kitchen. Can it eat beef? Of course, no problem. Fambus' face lit up with joy. Fambus had thought that he would have to spend some more effort to convince Stephen. Unexpectedly, Stephen's tolerance was much higher than she had imagined. He actually accepted Ewan so easily. He wasn't like a normal person whose first reaction upon seeing Ewan was to run. Stephen was scared at first, but he behaved very normally afterward. He didn't seem to be afraid of Ewan at all. Fambus took a lot of meat from the kitchen. Stephen was rich and probably wouldn't care about the beef. While she was feeding Ewan, Stephen walked over. Fambus was a bit embarrassed. You tamed it? Yes. Fambus looked at Stephen. Mr. Stephen, aren't you afraid? I've seen even the most ferocious beasts. It's not that big compared to the beasts I've seen. Fambus didn't think so. Ewan was a jaguar, the most ferocious predator on the American continent. The only animal bigger than a jaguar is a bear. But in terms of aggression, bears couldn't compare to jaguars. The other was crocodiles. Crocodiles didn't care about their own kind. When they went crazy, they would even eat their own kind. She didn't think that Stephen would casually touch a crocodile. Most parents would think that their children were the most outstanding. Fambus thought so too. She felt that Ewan was the best. There were some things she couldn't say directly. Ewan had killed before. More than 20 kilograms of meat were all eaten by Ewan. It was rare for Ewan to eat so much. Just then, the other bodyguards came to the villa one after another. Okay, pack up, Stephen said. We're going to the wilderness later. I need to go to a natural location. This time, Stephen had to choose a location. He'd already started planning a kidnapping movie. Ever since the plan was leaked, all the similar movies in Hollywood had been canceled. No one and no studio wanted to clash with Stephen's theme and time. Everyone got into a business car. But before long, Fambus suddenly said, "There seems to be a car following us." Everyone was immediately alarmed and took out their guns. After all, they all knew that Stephen had just been kidnapped not long ago. There was no guarantee that there wouldn't be a second kidnapping. Stephen was also nervous. Stop the car by the side of the road. Why? Stephen asked. Mr. Stephen, if the car following us really has bad intentions, it's more dangerous to drive on the road, one of the bodyguards said. It's very likely that they'll crash into us and force our car to roll on the road, causing casualties in the car and causing us to lose our ability to fight. What do we do now? Stephen asked. Fambus glanced at the car that had stopped behind them and said to Tori, "Tori, let's go check it out." The two got out of the car and walked directly to the car behind them. Stephen saw that Fambus had dragged the person in the car behind them out and beaten him up. After a while, the two of them returned. Mr. Stephen, it's two reporters. Stephen nodded. It was just a false alarm. As for Fambus beating the reporter up, he didn't care at all. No one would stand up for the reporter even if he killed the person who dared to follow him, let alone beat him up. Fambus was still standing outside the car, looking around. Chapter 875. Fambus, what's wrong? Get in the car. Mr. Stephen, there's trouble. We need to go back, Fambus said with a serious expression. What's wrong? What did you find? Fambus shook his head. I didn't find anything, but I sense danger. You're not joking, are you? Fambus, stop fooling around. Mr. Stephen's matter is more important. I'm not joking. Mr. Stephen, for the sake of your safety, you should think about it carefully. Famudus insisted on his own idea. I can sense danger. Stephen frowned and pondered for a moment. Are you serious? Famudus nodded solemnly. Go home, Stephen said. He didn't want to take the risk, even though the possibility was low. After experiencing danger twice, Stephen was very careful now. The other bodyguards all complained about Famudus. They felt that he was looking for trouble. When they reached Stephen's house, a figure rushed out from the side of the road without warning and blocked the front of the car. The bodyguard hurriedly slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The front of the car hit the man, who fell to the ground. Did you hit someone? Mr. Stephen, he suddenly rushed out. The bodyguard driving the car explained. Let's not talk too much. Get out and check the man's injuries. Call an ambulance. The bodyguard hurriedly got out of the car and went to the man on the ground. As soon as he squatted down, the man suddenly raised his hand and grabbed the bodyguard's neck. Then, the bodyguard's neck was broken and he was smashed into the windshield. Ah! Stephen was shocked. Famudus reacted the fastest. He pulled out his gun and fired 2 shots at the man in front. The man dodged left and right and then hit the front of the car. Bang! The entire car was pushed back more than a meter. Famudus quickly jumped into the driver's seat and slammed on the accelerator. The commercial vehicle ran over the man's body. But everyone saw from the rearview mirror that the man who had been run over by the car had actually stood up again. Everyone felt their hair stand on end. He didn't die? Was he a monster? The man stood on the road and watched the car leave. He didn't plan on chasing. What's wrong with this guy? Who is he? Stephen asked in horror. Stephen, I think we have a problem. Famudus said, you'd better find more people to protect you. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to guarantee your safety with just a few of us. What is that thing? The Terminator? I quit. I'm not doing it either. I didn't say that I was going to fight such a monster. The 3 bodyguards threw in the towel and ran away. Famudus, Tori, and the other 2 bodyguards were left. What do we do now? What should I do? Stephen asked helplessly. Mr. Stephen, I can introduce you to some of my friends. One of the bodyguards, Orion, said. What partner? Some idle mercenaries, Orion said. They're all very capable, but their fees are quite expensive. All right. Get them all here. At this moment, Stephen had already lost his sense of propriety and hurriedly said. With only 4 bodyguards by his side, he really did not feel safe. Famudus didn't say anything. She didn't have much hope for Orion's so-called friend. She had seen very clearly how strong the man was just now. Even with her marksmanship, she could not hit him at such a close distance. There was also a car crash, which caused the car to move backwards. And after being run over, he was not injured at all. He did not look like a normal person at all. When they reached home, Stephen was just about to call the police. Famudus stopped him. Mr. Stephen, it's not a good time to call the police. Why? If you call the police now, they'll definitely leave some people to protect you, Famudus said. But that way, Orion's friends won't be able to come. Even if they come, they won't be able to use some illegal weapons. Orion nodded. My friends are mercenaries. They have many military-grade weapons. It's not good to expose them to the police. Not long after, Orion's friend arrived. After negotiating with his mercenary friends for a while, Orion came to Stephen. Mr. Stephen, my friends are asking for $1 million. How long can they protect me? Stephen asked. They'll help you get rid of that person, Orion said. Orion said, as long as that person comes within 3 days, they will use powerful firepower to kill that person. Good, that's good. Only then did Stephen feel a little more relieved. At noon, Stephen could not eat anything. He felt uneasy. He looked at Famudus, who was not far away. Famudus, you won't run away, right? No, it's my job. That's good. After this matter is over, I'll give you a raise. Famudus's eyes brightened. Can you give me some money in advance? Yes, of course, Stephen said. Oh, I almost forgot. Maybe Chin can help me with this. Mr. Stephen, Mr. Chun can't help. The person who wants to kill you isn't even afraid of being run over by a car. Are you sure Mr. Chun can help? Chun is very powerful. We're not dealing with an ordinary person now. Then, okay. After hesitating for a while, Stephen still decided not to give Chen Zhao more trouble. The men that Orion had found had already set up a fortification outside. For the whole day, Stephen was anxious and could not calm down. Famutus, I won't die, right? I won't, Famus replied calmly. The sky began to darken. Famutus kept Evan by Stephen's side. Famus saw that Stephen had a gun in his hand the entire time. Mr. Stephen, give me the gun. Why? I have to keep it with me. Do you know how many people accidentally fire and hurt themselves every year because they're nervous? Last year, there were more than 100,000 cases in America. I know how to use a gun. It's not about knowing, Famutus said. Famutus said, leave the defense to us. We won't let anyone hurt you. By the way, Mr. Stephen, do you know who the person who attacked you is? Chapter 876. From the window, they could see 3 mercenaries smoking on the grass below. Perhaps they were already used to this atmosphere, so they didn't feel nervous at all. For them, this place was much easier than the missions they'd taken in the past. Under normal circumstances, they might be ambushing in a desert somewhere, or in some swamp, or even in some pit. But here, not only did they have expensive food provided by Stephen, but they could also do whatever they wanted. And all they had to face was one enemy. Although they'd heard Orion talk about it before, the enemy seemed to be very powerful. But they had guns. They couldn't think of a reason to be afraid. I'm going to pee, a mercenary said as he stood up. Fuck, Camiso. This is the director's house. Don't pee everywhere. Go to the bathroom inside. Too troublesome. There's no one here anyway. Ignoring his companion's dissuasion, Camiso pulled down his pants and stood in the grass to pee. Suddenly, Camiso saw something in the grass. Camiso poked his head out, and a thought popped into his head. A person? The next moment, Camiso was dragged into the grass. Oh no, something happened to Camiso. The other 2 mercenaries rushed to the grass and saw that blood was starting to seep out of the grass. The 2 mercenaries immediately raised their guns and looked at the grass warily. You go pull the grass away. One of the mercenaries used the tip of his gun to pull the grass away. They saw a headless body. Fuck, it's Camiso. Captain, something happened here. Camiso is dead. What? Where's the enemy? I don't see him. Everyone stay alert. The enemy has invaded the villa. Libel stood in the darkness a dozen meters in front of the 2 mercenaries. But the 2 mercenaries couldn't see him. Libel seemed to have completely merged with the darkness. A cruel smile appeared on his face, and he held a head in his hand. It was Camiso's head. Libel moved again and started a new round of hunting. The 2 mercenaries standing outside the grass seemed to hear the sound. Did you hear that? I think there's a sound. Maybe it's the wind. The 2 mercenaries weren't sure, but Camiso's death made them even more careful. Suddenly, a voice came from the left. Da-da-da. The 2 tensed mercenaries immediately pulled the trigger. After firing dozens of bullets, the 2 of them finally stopped. Alistair, Ollie, what happened? Did you encounter any enemies? No, it could be. Esther was about to answer when he suddenly saw a black shadow standing behind Ollie. Ollie, behind you. But at that moment, Ollie's head suddenly fell to the ground. The figure had already reached out and strangled Esther. Da-da-da. What to do? What to do? That guy is here. That unkillable monster is here. Stephen's scalp was about to explode as he listened to the gunshots coming from outside. At this moment, 4 or 5 mercenaries ran in. What are you doing here? Has the enemy been eliminated? Famdus asked. No, that guy is elusive. We've already lost 7 people. There's nothing we can do in the dark, the leader said. We'll stay in the house and wait for him to walk into the trap. Famdus's expression changed slightly. He retreated to Stephen's side and whispered, Mr. Stephen, follow me closely. We'll retreat at any time. Why? We still have so many people. Why run? Stephen asked, confused. Just then, the lights in the entire house suddenly went dark. That was what Famdus was worried about. The situation instantly turned chaotic. Stephen immediately became agitated. That person is here. In the darkness, a person stood in the hallway. The moonlight shining in from the window could clearly see that the person was standing there. but the moonlight seemed unwilling to touch him. It was as if he was shrouded in a layer of darkness. "Who the hell are you?" Stephen yelled. "Mr. Stephen, you forgot? You actually forgot me." Stephen felt that the voice was familiar, but he couldn't remember where he'd heard it before. "Who exactly are you?" "Don't worry. I'll let you know who I am soon." Libel's voice was filled with excitement. "You'll know soon enough. Open fire!" The leader of the mercenary group shouted, and everyone's guns immediately burst into flames. Da-da-da. Libel's figure moved and disappeared into the darkness again. "Stop!" The mercenary group's leader gave the order, and the gunshots suddenly stopped. The atmosphere became tense. Every mercenary stared at the hallway nervously. Clang! The window suddenly shattered. Libel charged in through the window and pounced on a mercenary. Ah! Bang, bang. Fambus fired, but Libel dodged and avoided Fambus' shot. Just as Libel was about to pounce on Fambus, Stephen pounced on him. In terms of body size and weight, Stephen was 3 times heavier than Libel. But when Libel raised his leg, Stephen was kicked away. "Stephen!" Fambus fired again. Libel jumped out of the window and disappeared into the darkness. Fambus looked at Stephen worriedly. Stephen stood up again, but he seemed to be limping. He was injured. Fambus had never seen an enemy like this before. He was completely unbeatable. Even a beast like Stephen had been injured in an instant. "Damn, I don't want to play anymore. He's a monster," the leader shouted. The mercenaries were already thinking of retreating. All of them started to run out, but as soon as they stepped out of the house, they were attacked by Libel. "Ah, Mr. Stephen, let's go," Fambus said in a low voice. "Stephen, can you keep up?" Roar! Stephen limped behind Fambus. Stephen was extremely nervous. "Where are we going?" Fambus glanced at the mercenaries at the entrance, who were currently fighting with Libel. Gunshots rang out one after another, continuing to ring out. "I've already prepared the car," Fambus said. "You knew that they couldn't stop us?" "My instincts have always been accurate," Fambus said. "By the way, you don't mind if I blow up your house, right?" "What?" Stephen didn't understand. Rumble. Stephen's house had already turned into ashes. Stephen was dumbfounded. Chapter 877. You just blew up $1 million. If you don't want to die, you better get in the car now. "That guy didn't die?" Stephen asked with wide eyes. "No, I can feel it." "He's not dead yet," Fambus said. Stephen hurriedly got into the car. Fambus was just about to start the car. There was a sudden bang from the back of the carriage, and Libel was already lying on the back of the carriage. "Ah, he's here, he's here. Stephen, you old thing. Do you still remember?" Bang! Fambus turned around and fired. Libel fell out of the trunk. The car started in an instant and sped away. "Is he dead?" "No." "Do you know who he is?" "No." Stephen was still dumbfounded. "Who is he?" Famutus glanced at the rearview mirror. "He's chasing us again." Stephen looked back. "He can outrun a car?" "I can't." Fambus looked behind him and saw that Libel was being pulled further and further away. Seeing that Stephen was about to escape, Libel looked around and directly broke the window of a car by the road. Libel's body began to emit a black gas, which seeped into the gaps of the car. Hoo-hoo, the car started and chased after Stephen's car again. "He's here again," Fambus said. "Where are we going now?" "Police station. I hope the police can protect you," Fambus said. Duong. Libel's car crashed heavily into the rear of Stephen and Fambus's car. "Faster, faster," Stephen yelled. "This car only has this kind of speed." The car belonged to Fambus. Fambus's heart ached every time it crashed into it. "Mr. Stephen, will you pay for the repair of this car?" "If we can escape, I'll give you a new car," Stephen said nervously. "Is there no way to kill that monster?" "At least not with pistols," Fambus said. Stephen took out his phone. "Hey, Chun, I'm being chased by an unkillable monster. Do you know what time it is? Did you know Phalai was pregnant? Call me at this time." "Duong, I'm going to die." Stephen screamed. "Come to my house." Chun Zhao yawned. "Call me 3 minutes before you arrive." "That's all." "That way," Stephen called out. "That's not the way to the police station." Stephen reached out and deflected the reverse. "You're crazy. Do you know what you're doing?" Those mercenaries couldn't even kill that monster with their powerful firepower. Do you think the police can protect me? Stephen suddenly became calm. You said it yourself. The firepower of the police can't compare to mercenaries. So if you want the police to protect me, I'll only die faster. Go to Chin's house. You're the crazy one. You don't trust the police. You'd rather trust that Chinese man. I told you to go to Chin's house. I refuse. I don't want to die. Famtis directly refused. I'll give you $100,000 if you can send me to Chin's house. Famtis froze for a moment and turned to look at Stephen. Are you serious? 100,000 USD. She had never seen so much money in her life. The $100,000 pierced through her heart. Yes, go to Chin's house. Where is it? How far is it? Mountain town. It should be 30 kilometers. I'll show you the way. Famtis' fighting spirit rose, and he sped up. Nothing was more important than $100,000. As long as he had $100,000, Evan could eat whatever he wanted. He wouldn't have to starve or eat dog food anymore. However, Libel's car wasn't slow either. He caught up to the car in front and crashed heavily into the back of the car. Faster, faster. Stephen's breathing was rapid. Turn right, then turn left again. Damn, why does this Chinese man live in such a remote place? Stephen looked back at the car behind. The car behind us is emitting black smoke. Is it on fire? Famtis looked back. I don't think it's on fire. It's more like it's being controlled by a demon. Have you seen this before? No. Stephen's hair stood on end. The one chasing you seems to be a demon, right? Are you kidding? Stephen's expression stiffened even more. There's a fork in the road ahead. Where should we go? Turn left in the direction of Mirror Lake. Just then, Stephen took out his phone again. Chun, I'll be there soon. Asterisk Shoal, stop sleeping. I'm dying. Got it. I'm getting up. Famutius was speechless. They were in dire straits. But from Chen Zhao's tone, he seemed to have just woken up. Could this guy really save them? Would he drag this guy down? Whatever. He couldn't care so much. How much farther? A few kilometers. It's very close. Chun, what's wrong? Fei Lai asked in a daze. Go back to sleep. Stephen seems to be being chased by something. I told him to run to our house. I'll go down and take care of it. Go back to sleep. Oh. Fei Lai continued to sleep peacefully. Chun Zhao stretched. He got up and went to Jerlin's room next door. He kissed the sleeping girl. You two, close the door later. There might be some noise, Chun Zhao said to the two underlings guarding the room. Yes, master. Chun Zhao went downstairs and poured a glass of water. He walked to the door with the glass and waited for Stephen. He could already hear the sound of tires rubbing against the ground in the distance. How much farther? It's up ahead. The car went around a corner. Stephen could already see Chun Zhao standing at the door. Famtis also saw Chun Zhao. He was wearing pajamas and had a glass of water in his hand. The car stopped before Chun Zhao. Stephen, Famtis, and Evan rushed out of the car. Chun, there's a demon chasing us. Drink some water and calm down. There are no demons in the world. Chun Zhao handed the glass to Stephen. Mr. Chun, Mr. Stephen isn't joking. There really are demons. Guns are useless against them. Even a car can't kill them. Seeing Chun Zhao's attitude, Famtis was already in despair. Looking at Chun Zhao's sleepy eyes, she really didn't believe that he could solve the problem. Quiet down. My girlfriend and daughter are still sleeping. Famtis was completely speechless. He turned to look at Stephen. Did you see that? That's your last hope. Chun, that thing is coming. Chapter 878. The moment Libel saw Chun Zhao, his hatred and resentment grew even crazier. The car stopped before Chun Zhao. Famtis looked at Chun Zhao. She thought that Chun Zhao's legs must have gone soft from fear. He didn't even move. At the time, she thought that the monster would just drive over. Just then, the car door opened. A person walked out. He was shrouded in a black aura. Famtis and Stephen could tell that the man wasn't normal. That's great. That's really great. The two people I hate the most, the two people who caused me to be in this situation, have actually gathered together. I feel like God hasn't abandoned me, huh? That's great. Hey, lower your voice. Someone's sleeping inside. Stephen and Fambus stared at Chun Zhao speechlessly. Perfect. After I kill you, I'll kill your family too. I'll send them to accompany you. Libel suddenly pounced at Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao raised his head and kicked. Libel lost control and smashed into the windshield. Both Stephen and Fambus were stunned. The monster was kicked away. Both of them looked at Chun Zhao, who was yawning. Libel stood up again and pounced at Chun Zhao again. Bang! The next moment, Libel was kicked away again. So sleepy. Chun Zhao rubbed his eyes. Libel didn't believe it. He wasn't willing to accept it. He was already like this. Why couldn't he beat Chun Zhao? Libel charged at Chun Zhao again and threw a punch at him. Watch out! Fambus immediately warned Chun Zhao when he saw Libel's ferocious attack. Libel's fist hit Chun Zhao's face. Chun Zhao tilted his head slightly. Fambus and Stephen stared at Chun Zhao in shock. Isn't it just like that? Chun, doesn't it hurt? Chun Zhao touched his cheek. Let me teach you how to punch. Stephen and Fambus saw Chun Zhao's fist turn red the moment he punched. The moment it hit Libel's stomach, the black aura around him exploded. As for Libel, he lost control of his body and smashed through the parked car behind him. Stephen and Fambus' eyes almost fell out of their sockets. Fambus remembered that he'd met Chun Zhao twice in the past few days. She had even thought about teaching him a lesson. Now he suddenly felt so stupid. A mouse actually dared to provoke a tiger. Stephen had always known that Chun Zhao was very powerful. However, he did not have a clear concept of the word powerful. He didn't know how strong Chun Zhao was. But now he finally had a clearer understanding. The monster that was hunting him was invincible. This invincible monster couldn't defeat Chun Zhao. Bang! Fambus's car finally exploded under the battered state. Libel stood up again, the black aura around him thicker. The flames on his back reflected the black aura on his body. Wow! At this moment, Jerlin's cries came from the villa. She was startled awake by the explosion. Chun Zhao rubbed his forehead and looked at Libel. You woke my daughter up? I'll make sure she never wakes up again, Libel said cruelly. Fambus raised an eyebrow. She could feel that Chun Zhao had changed. His gaze had changed. Chun Zhao finally started walking. Fambus realized that Chun Zhao hadn't moved at all. He'd been standing there the whole time. But now he finally walked forward. What did you just say? I'm going to... Libel didn't finish. Chun Zhao suddenly appeared above his head and punched at him with his right fist. Libel hurriedly raised his arm to block. Bang! Black blood splattered on the burning car behind him. Stephen's mouth hung open. Libel's right arm had turned into minced meat. Fambus' pupils constricted. She thought that Libel was already a monster. But compared to Chun Zhao, Libel was more like a sheep that had entered a tiger's den. What did you just say? Chun Zhao stood before Libel. Libel wanted to turn and run, but Chun Zhao had already grabbed his left arm. Repeat what you just said. Chun Zhao pinched Libel's mouth and lifted him into the air with one hand. Fambus and Stephen heard the sound of bones cracking in Libel's jaw. Libel's jaw had been completely crushed. Stephen, go get my kids. It's time for supper. Oh! Stephen immediately ran into the mansion. Fambus didn't understand what Chun Zhao meant. What kids? What's supper time? Soon she understood. A large fiery red lizard ran out. Stephen hid behind Fambus in fear. In fact, Fambus was also very happy at this moment. Abidos was really too big. Abidos went up and bit down on one of Libel's legs that was lifted in the air. Libel tried to resist, but Chun Zhao pinched his face. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't. Fambus was still paying attention to Abidos and marveling at its size. Her body was suddenly pushed by a huge force. Fambus lost her balance and fell to the ground. Then, she saw a huge body pass in front of her. Anyone who saw the princess for the first time would be shocked by her figure. Princess also bit Libel's other leg. Crack, crack, crack. Princess's by force was much stronger than Abidos. Abidos was still tearing, but Princess had bitten off Libel's leg. Abidos saw that Princess had torn off a leg, so he immediately went up to fight Princess for food. The two behemoths were fighting over it. Fambus felt his scalp go numb. Just then, Black Ma and White Ma came out too. Although Black Ma and White Ma were not as big as Abidos and Princess, they were still bigger than Evan. Famutus was dumbfounded by what he saw. Were all the pets raised by the Chinese so perverted? Just then, Libel's arm that Chinzhao had crushed started growing again. As expected, it was another believer of the god of otherworldlings. Chinzhao took out his bronze sword and nailed Libel to the ground. "Don't eat too much tonight," Chinzhao said. "If you're full, leave some for Amon." With that, Chinzhao ignored Libel and said to Stephen, "Let's go in." "Huh? We're not going to care about him? Why should we? Do you want to watch Abidos and the others eat supper?" Stephen glanced at Libel. He would only have nightmares if he looked too much. He decided not to watch and followed Chinzhao into the living room. Chapter 879. "Just an idiot with water in his head," Chinzhao said casually. In Chinzhao's mind, people who believed in those alien gods were crazy. Other than having water in their heads, there was no other explanation. Chinzhao believed that a good religion, one that could be recognized by the government, had to first guide people to do good, to maintain the stability of society, and not to encourage believers to do some crazy things. By the way, who is that guy? Why does he treat us as enemies? Libel probably didn't know that after all the trouble he'd caused, Chinzhao and Stephen didn't even know who he was. They didn't even care about him at all. Stephen was also confused. I don't know. He felt that he was innocent and that a monster had a grudge against him for no reason. "Oh, is this your pet?" Chinzhao looked at Fambus Evan. "It seems to be injured. Come here, I'll help you heal it." Evan looked at Chinzhao, confused. It wasn't that he didn't understand Chinzhao. On the contrary, it understood Chinzhao's words. That was why he looked confused. Chinzhao had used the skill stone, beast language. That was why he could communicate with any wild animal. Evan limped toward Chinzhao. Fambus' face was filled with surprise because Evan rarely got close to strangers. But now, Evan actually walked toward Chinzhao. Chinzhao reached out and touched Evan's hind leg. "It's okay. It's just a dislocation. Bear with the pain." Evan nodded. Fambus was even more surprised. It was the first time he'd seen Evan act so human. In the past, Evan was very clingy, but most of the time, it was a mother-son bond. Evan rarely reacted to her words, but when facing a stranger, he was actually so human. Crack! Chinzhao straightened Evan's leg, and Evan's movements became much easier. But Evan didn't dare to be impudent here. Everyone in this house was a wretched wretch. "Chen, are you a spiritualist?" Stephen asked. "Amateur. Don't you think it's really late?" "It is. Which room do I sleep in tonight? If you don't have enough room, I can squeeze in." "That's good too. The princess and the others' rooms are still empty. You can go to their rooms to rest. You know that the princess and the others won't bite, except for the occasional hunger in their sleep." In Chinzhao's house, Stephen could finally sleep peacefully. Only Chinzhao could give him a sense of security and trust. The next morning, Stephen and Fambus left in a hurry. The incident last night was not a small one. After all, so many people had died in Stephen's house. Furthermore, there were guns and cannons, and even Stephen's villa was bombed in the end. His house was probably filled with police officers last night. "Chun, what happened to Stephen's family? This isn't your plan again, is it?" Rasfa had just received the news. "No," Chinzhao said. "He was being chased and ran to my house in the middle of the night." "So interesting?" Interesting." Chinzhao didn't know what Rasfa was thinking. Anyway, Stephen had almost peed his pants yesterday. If it was Rasfa, it would probably be the same. "Chun, I think the attack on Stephen's house will be another hot news. That video should be released soon. I have a reporter friend. Send the video to him." "Sure." Rasfa didn't care who released the news. In the end, it had to be sent to reporters. Rather than someone else, he'd rather send it to someone he knew. That day, all the media repeated the same news again. Director Stephen's house had been attacked. Of course, Stephen was safe and sound. Everyone was condemning this terrorist attack. Just then a video suddenly appeared. It was a recording of when Steven and Rasfa had been kidnapped last time. In the dark environment, Steven and Rasfa each held an automatic rifle. They had just killed a kidnapper. Then, it was their conversation. They didn't act like old men at all. Instead, they were more like two lone heroes who had entered a tiger's den. Instantly, America was in an uproar. No one thought that director Steven and the billionaire Rasfa would have such a side. Everyone tried to verify whether the video was real or fake, or if it was just a part of a movie. The second half of the video was gone because the camera had been shot off. There was only the conversation between the two, with the sound of gunshots and bombs in between. This caused everyone to imagine the scene themselves. From the conversation between the two of them, as well as the gunshots and explosions around them, they had a very clear picture of what was going on. A day after the video appeared, Steven and Rasfa finally accepted an interview from the media. They said that the video was real. At the same time, Steven also said that the attack on his mansion 2 days ago was from these kidnappers. This news ignited the passion of America's citizens. Of course, they were also worried about the security and the police's slow response. After all, even the director's house had been attacked. Throughout the entire process, the police had been slow to react. They didn't actively participate in the case the whole time. This made the police very passive. This incident was now known to everyone, and there was no one who did not know about it. Steven also became a hero in America because of this. When Steven announced that this incident would be adapted into a movie, the entire Hollywood was in an uproar. Everyone could imagine how sensational the movie would be. It was a super popular event, directed by a super director, and something that the director had experienced personally. All the film companies were asking around, wanting to know if Steven wanted to invest in it. Usually, the film company would come up with a plan first, discuss the budget, and then find a suitable director. But for Steven, they would directly ask if he wanted money and how much he wanted. As long as Steven was willing to invest, they wouldn't waste any time. They would just tell him how much he wanted and give him as much as he wanted. However, this movie was no longer accepting outside investments. After all, Chen Zhao, Steven, and Rasfa had already discussed it. The three of them would play together. Chen Zhao was an outsider. He was even an outsider. Usually, no matter how rich he was, he wouldn't invest in a Hollywood movie. For example, there were many rich people in America, but the capitalists couldn't invest in Hollywood because Hollywood was xenophobic. Chapter 880. The weather in November was starting to get cold. Of course, the temperature difference in Los Angeles wasn't that big. Little Jerlyn was very strong, at least for a child less than 3 months old. She could already call Dad and Mom. She could also run, jump, and swim. The temperature had dropped a few degrees, but Chun Zhao still let her play in the water. A person's immunity was determined from a young age. Chun Zhao didn't expect Jerlyn to be strong or better than athletes in the future. However, he still hoped that she could be healthy. If the conditions allowed and she was interested, Chun Zhao wouldn't object. Little Jerlyn had been working hard to swim to the center of the lake. But until now, she still hadn't done it. To her, this was the ultimate goal. A car stopped in front of the house. Little Jerlyn ran out in a big stride. Got out of the car, and Jerlyn immediately went up to her. Squeak 4's heart melted when she saw Jerlyn pouncing at her. Little Jerlyn was wearing a diaper. She was naked and had a small belly. Every time Jerlyn opened her mouth, saliva would fly everywhere. Kids usually couldn't control their saliva. Once they opened their mouths, saliva would flow to the corners. 4 carried Jerlyn into the living room. Feilai, why don't you let Jerlyn wear more clothes? You're not mistreating her just because she's not your child, right? Feilai was speechless. I want to dress her pretty, but every time I do, she'll have her friends tear her clothes and then jump into the water to play. Feilai was helpless too. Jerlyn had to soak in the water for at least 2 to 3 hours every day. She didn't do it at the same time either. She went into the water from morning to afternoon and then to night. In between, she would sleep, rest, or play other times. Little Jerlyn was wild and very active. Medically speaking, normal kids should be active. The healthier they were, the more active they were. This was because a child's cerebral cortex actively inhibited the process, which was weaker than the process of excitement. The younger they were, the more active they were. This kind of active process was very beneficial for the development of a child's brain. If their brain was active for a long time, they would be more cheerful and lively. The average temperature these 2 days has been below 22 degrees. Are you sure it's okay for Jerlin to go into the water? Chin said it's fine. He said Jerlin has already gotten used to the temperature change, so he didn't stop her. Fine. Since Chin says so, I can't object. For trusted Chun Zhao's judgment. In fact, as long as one overcomes the doting that parents have for their children, many behaviors that seem dangerous to children are not really dangerous. For example, children's climbing and jumping may seem dangerous to adults, but in fact, the possibility of children suffering from side effects from bumping into things is very low. Suppressing this kind of nature would instead bring about some uncertain consequences. For example, many people with depression have suppressed their natural instincts since they were young. When they grew up, their brains would always be in a state of self-restraint. The activity of the cerebral cortex would be too weak, and they would eventually suffer from depression. 4. Aren't you working today? I'm off today, so I came to visit you, For said. Isn't Chin home? I went out to work. For looked at Fei Lai's growing belly. She had once thought Fei Lai would never be able to get pregnant again, but she didn't expect Chun Zhao to even have a solution for this. Aren't you lonely at home? Just then, there was a clang from the kitchen. Then she saw Princess walk out covered in ketchup. She looked at Fei Lai pitifully. Fine, I take back what I said. With these pets by Fei Lai's side, she would never feel lonely. For started to envy Fei Lai. To her, these pets were actually all children. They were loyal and understanding. Occasionally, they would throw a tantrum or make a joke. These could all ease people's emotions. Data showed that pregnant women in families with pets had a 2% higher chance of giving birth to a healthy baby. Of course, pets still had to be protected from diseases and parasites. Some pregnant women with allergies were also unsuitable for pets. Fei Lai had no problems in this aspect. Plus, she had Chun Zhao, a doctor, by her side. For didn't have to worry too much. Chun Zhao would definitely consider things more comprehensively than her. Because For often came to Chun Zhao and Fei Lai's house, she was already very familiar with Chun Zhao's family members. Many times, she even wanted Chun Zhao to train a pet for her. What's Chun busy with recently? I think he's working on some movie project with a friend. I'm not sure. Fei Lai actually knew what Chun Zhao had been doing recently. It was the IP project that Chun Zhao, Steven, and Rasfa were working on. But the fewer people who knew about it, the better, even if For was trustworthy. He's planning to enter Hollywood? No. His friend asked him to invest in a movie. He has some cash, so he invested it. For had actually known Chun Zhao for a long time, even before Fei Lai. She remembered that when she first met Chun Zhao, he wasn't so rich. But a year had passed, and Chun Zhao had already earned tens of millions of dollars. For felt that she couldn't catch up to his speed of earning money. Of course, For and Chun Zhao were very different. For had grown up in an environment where she didn't crave money that much. Even though Chun Zhao had earned tens of millions, he still wasn't satisfied. Chun Zhao always had a sense of crisis. He needed money to give himself a sense of security. He'd experienced the pain of not having money. Many of the things he did were to earn money. For example, he'd invested in Ford and Tiger, and he'd started all sorts of side businesses. Of course, Chun Zhao wouldn't give up. He would never give up on his main profession. It was also his ability to survive and his medical skills. At the moment, Chun Zhao was treating a woman in her 50s. Mrs. Peter, your problem isn't serious. You just need to walk more. Thank you, Mr. Chun. You're a good person. God will protect you. Huh, I'm not a believer, Chun Zhao replied, smiling. No, God will protect every good person. Mrs. Peter, I'm an illegal doctor. Are you sure I'm a good person? This has nothing to do with profession. I just feel kindness from you. Smiling, Mrs. Peter pulled Chun Zhao over. Chun Zhao had nothing to do now, so he sat in the yard and chatted with Mrs. Peter. Chun Zhao saw a book on the table. Mrs. Peter, do you study theology? I have 43 degrees in different fields, and theology is my 44th field of study. Chun Zhao was stunned. This Mrs. Peter was actually a super genius. For a person in her 50s, 10 years of maturation was deducted. This meant that she could get a degree in a different field in almost a year. Mrs. Peter, you should have a medical certificate too, right? Chapter 881. Physics, Biology, Chemistry, and Math. These should all be very scientific subjects. They should have helped you build a complete worldview. How can you still learn theology? Chen Zhao looked at Mrs. Peter curiously. There was a saying that went, the end of science is theology, and the end of theology is philosophy. Actually, that wasn't the case. Science was very rational. Science was materialism, while theology was idealism. Science was because I believed it existed and I had to prove it. Theology was because I thought it existed, so it must exist. These were two completely different ways of thinking. Therefore, it was hard for Chen Zhao to imagine a scientist studying theology. What about you? Mrs. Peter looked at Chen Zhao. Do you believe in God? Chen Zhao thought about it. God? He'd seen demons, angels, and otherworldly gods. However, Chen Zhao was still doubtful about whether God really existed. Everyone had their own understanding of God. In religious descriptions, God was omnipotent and omnipresent. Atheists and theists actually had very similar viewpoints. Because atheists and theists both felt that God existed in everyone's heart. I'm a wavering person, Chen Zhao answered. I only believe in what I see. Then you're a rational person, Mrs. Peter said, chuckling. Chen Zhao looked at her. She must have been a beauty when she was young. Even though he had aged, his body still carried a kind of graceful and luxurious temperament. Actually, Mrs. Peter wasn't very old now. I used to be a rational person too, Mrs. Peter said. A very pure one. I'm even an atheist. Then what changed you? Forget it. It's nice talking with you. Let's change the topic. Chen Zhao was stunned. Weren't they having fun? Why did they suddenly change the topic? Oh, you said that you can't study medicine because you haven't learned it. Why is that? Is it a family tradition? Actually, this question goes back to the previous topic. Mrs. Peter looked at Chen Zhao. You also like to explore secrets. People are curious, aren't they? Then what I'm about to say next, you can just treat it as a supernatural story. Don't question me. I won't accept any questions. If you say that, it means that you have been questioned many times in the past. I said it to share, not to be questioned. Mrs. Peters said, it was a cold night 3 years ago. I was sitting in a wheelchair reading Feynman's lectures on physics. Then a man appeared in front of me. He was wearing a wide-brimmed felt hat and a red patterned scarf. I couldn't see his face clearly. He asked me if I was willing to stand up. Chen Zhao raised his head in surprise and looked at Madame Peter's legs. Madame Peter, your legs? I've been in a wheelchair for 50 years, Mrs. Peters said. I was born with a thigh malformation. No wonder. How could a normal person spend so much time on studying? Perhaps only someone like her, who spent her entire life in a wheelchair, would spend all her time studying. I told him that I was willing. No matter the price, I was willing to stand up. I wanted to stand up. He said that I could stand up, but I had to agree to one of his requests. I couldn't study medicine. If I did, I wouldn't just lose my legs. I would lose even more. A demon contract? But what about this contract? There was no peace in such a request, right? So, you stood up? Yes. I slept for a while. Then my legs became like a normal person's. Mrs. Peter looked at Chen Zhao. That person was like God's messenger. From then on, I believed in God's existence. God's messenger? Chen Zhao looked at Mrs. Peter. Do you have any bad feelings? No, I think I'm fine. Chen Zhao wanted to ask Mrs. Peter to take a look at his legs. But after thinking about it, he felt that the request was a bit too much. Plus, Chen Zhao wasn't sure if the story was true. Even as someone from the supernatural world, this story sounded inconceivable. There were many unreasonable parts. Chen Zhao didn't know if Mrs. Peter hadn't thought through the story when she made it up, or if it was really God's messenger. To Chen Zhao, this was just an imperfect supernatural or mythical story. So, did you study theology to study this? Do you want to find a reasonable explanation to solve your fate? You can say that. Have you thought about it? What if it's a demon's deal? Child, I know what you're thinking. I study theology, so of course, I've come into contact with demon religions. No matter which religion it is, demons represent transactions, giving and receiving. A scholar once said that the original image of a demon was actually a merchant. Merchants make huge profits through transactions. People seem to be fair in transactions, but in reality, their interests have already been harmed. Mrs. Peters said, "But I didn't give anything, so I don't believe it's related to demons. Forbidding you from studying medicine isn't a sacrifice. I think it's a warning and not a transaction. Maybe God saw my future and gave me some kind of warning." Hearing Mrs. Peters' words, Chen Zhao lost interest in continuing the discussion. You couldn't question a believer's faith. She chose to believe in God because God formed her worldview. To argue and question her was not to challenge her God, but to challenge her worldview. She believed that her understanding was the truth. She didn't say it to share. Instead, she wanted some kind of support. Chen Zhao couldn't deny her. No matter what he said, she wouldn't believe it. Plus, Chen Zhao wasn't even sure if Mrs. Peter was telling the truth. "Mrs. Peter, it's getting late. I should leave." Chen Zhao stood up and said goodbye to Mrs. Peter. "Okay, my child. May God bless you." Although they had different understandings or ideals, Mrs. Peter was still a very amiable person. "If you have time, you can come and accompany me. Of course, I'll pay you." Chapter 882. Chen Zhao went to the headquarters of the supernatural organization. The people in the organization had all become much stronger. As the saying went, the leader was the deciding factor. A weakling as the leader wouldn't be recognized by the members. But with a strong leader, it wasn't about whether the members would recognize the leader. It was about whether the leader would recognize the member. With Chen Zhao's current prestige in the organization, no one doubted if he had the right to be the president anymore. They only needed to worry about whether Chen Zhao would think they weren't suitable to be a part of the organization. "President, the magic power of all the members of our association has reached D rank. What's the use of just magic power? We can't increase our combat ability." West was helpless too. Chen Zhao didn't even see them when they fought. Every time Chen Zhao had to act, it was usually a huge problem that couldn't be solved. For example, during the Irwin crisis, they'd helped, but against Abaddon, they'd all been killed in a second. Actually, their combat ability was pretty good as long as they weren't facing monsters like Abaddon or the Fallen Source. Ever since Pamela led the Evil Spirit Group, if the members didn't have a mission, they'd fight and train with the Evil Spirit Group. Therefore, each of them had rich experience in fighting evil spirits. Just then, Jolig and Padalu ran up to Chen Zhao. "President, we've improved the magic power testing device again. Now, it doesn't use pointers to represent values. Instead, it uses electronic numbers. It'll be more effective and direct to get the data. We've also increased the upper limit to 5,000. We'll definitely get your magic power data this time." Both of them were very excited. They worked hard to calculate Chen Zhao's magic power data. However, the previous two tests ended in failure. The first time, the magic power testing device had a threshold of 500. The second time, it was 1,500. In both tests, Chen Zhao's magic power far exceeded the threshold on the meter. So this time, after some research and experiments, they finally completed this magic power testing instrument with a threshold of 5,000 magic power. "Oh? Where's the device? You didn't bring it with you?" "It's in our lab." "Okay, I'll go take a look. I also want to know how much my magic power is." Wes followed too. In fact, he wasn't the only one. After learning that Chen Zhao was going to test his mana again, even Aduz ran to the lab. Everyone in the headquarters was crowded at the entrance of the laboratory. "Where are the instruments?" Chen Zhao asked. "There, that's it." Jolig pointed at a 2-meter device in the corner. The device looked like a height and weight measuring device, but there were 2 cylindrical spheres in front of it. "President, you can stand on it and release your mana while holding onto the 2 spirit stone handrails. So big, it can't be helped." In order to increase the maximum capacity of magic power, We need more complicated circuits, and we also need larger spirit stones and wood conductors. Chen Zhao stood on the machine and grabbed the 2 spiritual stone handles. That's enough. Release your magic, guild leader. Chen Zhao released his magic power. In an instant, the numbers on the mana testing instrument skyrocketed. In the end, all the numbers turned to 0, 0, 0, 0, and everyone could smell something burning. Stop! Stop! President, stop the mana output! Jolig paled. But it was too late. The circuits on the mana testing instrument emitted sparks and started burning. Chen Zhao hurriedly walked down from the device. Jalanash went up and released a chill to extinguish the fire. But by then, the device was already destroyed. Although the fire was extinguished, many circuits were destroyed. Jolig wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He and Padalu had worked together to make this. Why are you crying? It's just a device. Can't we just use a new one? Guild leader, I asked someone to buy these 2 spirit stone trees from overseas. Each one costs $200,000, Blackie said. Chen Zhao's eyes widened. So you just destroyed $400,000? President, you destroyed it, Jolig said. Also, including the development of the device, it cost about $500,000. Fuck, if you didn't make me test my magic, this wouldn't have happened. In the end, it's all your fault, Chen Zhao argued. Also, West, Chen Zhao argued. Isn't the budget for Jolig's lab too loose? You spent $500,000 on a useless instrument. Do you think we have enough funds this year? President, we do have a lot of funds left. Also, our higher-ups reduced our budget for next year. Reduced our budget? Tell our higher-ups that we'll double our budget next year. It'll be at least $10 million. If it's less than $10 million, we'll let the anti-terrorism department handle things like the Irwin incident. Also, the budget for next year has to arrive by the end of the year. If not, we'll go on strike temporarily. Huh? How what? Did I go back on my word? Fine. Also, this year's budget should be used up by the end of the year. How much money do we have in our accounts? $2.5 million. It's almost the end of the year. Calculate the year-end bonus for the members and organize a trip to spend the money. President, you're wise, Aduz shouted. President, you're wise. Year-end bonus and organizing a trip. The members had no reason to reject, except for West, who had a bitter expression. Everyone was excited. Their work this year had been fruitful. They could also be stubborn and ask their higher-ups for funds. Who asked them to have a stubborn president? It was fine if they didn't want to pay. If anything happened, they'd solve it themselves. President, where do you think we'll go on a trip? West asked. Go wherever you spend the most money. The last 2 times I went to New York and San Francisco, I didn't let you have a good time. This time, I'll make it up to you. If you want to play expensive, stay in the best hotels, and eat the best food. Other than gambling, all the normal expenses will be paid by the association. Aduz stopped talking. He did a good time these 2 times. Of course, he didn't mind a 3rd time. President, I love you to death. Patya exclaimed excitedly. President, we only have so many members. No matter how much we spend, we can't finish 2 million, right? Chapter 883. Okay, I got it. Don't rush me. I'll go over today and help you solve the problem. Aduz was on the phone. He was in a good mood. Chen Zhao had made a decision in the association today. He could get at least $10,000 as a year-end bonus. There were many other members too, but Angelite's performance was quite good. At least in the recent missions, he'd been very active. Although Aduz was only a security guard of the association, and an ordinary person at that, it was not as if he had never displayed his abilities. He had made his contribution to the best of his ability. For example, acting as a driver. He'd also cooperated with some dangerous situations. Even if he hadn't done much, he'd still put in some effort. President, I'll take half a day off, Aduz said. Chen Zhao glanced at him. You took a private job? The association didn't forbid people from taking private jobs. Chen Zhao didn't either. After all, Chen Zhao was an illegal doctor. It was a kind of private job. There were 3 types of missions in the association. One was a mission from the higher-ups, such as a haunted house or a serious paranormal event in a certain area. Such jobs couldn't be avoided. This was the reason for the existence of the Supernatural Association. The other type was private missions. They'd go out and find jobs themselves, then charge fees based on the situation. They'd definitely take missions from rich people. If they were regular people, they'd do it if they were willing to pay. The last type was the association's mission. It was also a planned mission. For example, when they chased after the family, it was the entire association's mission. The association wasn't a profit-making organization anyway. After all, it was a subsidiary of the anti-terrorism department. But Aduz was just a regular person. Can you handle it? Yes, President. It's not my first time. It's just a normal case of evil spirits harassing people. Aduz was so confident because of his equipment. As a member of the association, he had equipment too. For example, he could see evil spirits with his ESP glasses. He also had a magic stun gun and a magic shield suit. With these, he'd also taken care of a few normal missions. As for fear, there were more than 100 evil spirits living in the association. They dealt with him every day. He was already used to it. How could he be afraid of a supernatural event? Plus, each mission would pay at least a few $100s. Some could even go up to a few thousand. He couldn't reject them. Be careful, Chen Zhao said. All right, I'm just about to go home. If it's on the way, I can give you a ride. No need, I'll drive too, Aduz said. At this moment, two evil spirits floated over. They were all former residents of Maple Leaf Community and were now members of the association's evil spirit group. Aduz, are you going into the city? Can we take your car? You want to enter the city? For what? Chun Zhao asked. Guildmaster, we want to go for a walk. There's nothing else. Guildmaster, we're not going to cause trouble. Do you need a ride? No. No need. We'll take Aduz's car. The two evil spirits were terrified. Sit in Chun Zhao's car? That was impossible. They knew how terrifying Chun Zhao was. That was a terrifying monster that beat up a demon like a baton. Chun Zhao's sneeze could make their souls scatter. All right. The two evil spirits, Crone and Dillas, belonged to the more powerful category. Before Chun Zhao had subdued him, he had killed someone. So, they could wander around during the day. Crone, Dillas, Aduz said as he drove. Are you going to buy something? Ms. Pamela has been studying black magic recently. We're going to buy some magic materials for her. How about this? I'll take you to the magic shop. After you buy the things, come with me to a place. Help me when necessary, and then I'll send you back, Aduz said. Sure. Crone and Dillas nodded. They didn't want to come back so soon. There were too many rules in the association. It was inconvenient for them to move around. Now that they could stay outside officially for a while, they were more than happy to do so. Let's go here. Crone and Dillas floated out of the car and entered the magic shop. Since it was a magic shop, they naturally accepted all kinds of customers. Even if it was an evil spirit who came to buy things, they would accept them. As long as they paid, they could also buy what they needed. In fact, some spiritualists already had guardian spirits or evil spirit servants. Sometimes spiritualists would send these spirits to buy things for them. A moment later, Crone and Dillas walked out of the shop. Aduz, we can go now. Did you buy everything? Yes. Then come with me. I've got a job, Aduz said. Aduz, do you have extra clients? Introduce a few to us. You want to earn extra money too? It's not like you don't know the association's rules. As long as you have a valid reason, you can come out. I'll help you keep an eye out, but you two are too strong. Aduz looked at Crone and Dillas suspiciously. If it was just a normal supernatural incident, he could solve it himself. If he could earn money, why would he give it to them? Unless they could solve something that he couldn't solve himself. We're stronger than regular evil spirits, Crone said. We can devour them. As long as it's a client you introduce, we'll give you 20% of the commission, Dillas said. Sure, then let's test your strength first. Are there many evil spirits? If there are too many, we can't do anything. We can only devour one evil spirit a week. Actually, Crone and Dillas could devour a few more, but there were rules in the association. First, members of evil spirit groups couldn't devour each other. Second, they had to maintain their rationality before using the devouring ability. If they devoured too many and lost their rationality, they would be disposed of internally. Aduz parked the car outside a hotel and took out his phone. "Hello, Mr. Leon. I'm downstairs." "Okay, I'll come down now." Not long after, a man with neatly combed hair walked out. "Mr. Aduz, you're finally here. If you didn't come, I'd be fired. Tell me about the situation." Aduz was a marginal member in the association, but outside, he could be an expert. Chapter 884. Dong Dong. Why is it so noisy downstairs? Dominic said unhappily. Didn't they say this is the best hotel in L.A.? Why is it so noisy at this time? I'll send someone down to take a look, Oliphant said. Meanwhile, downstairs in Dominic's suite, Aduz, Crown, and Dylas were fighting evil spirits. I didn't expect there to be 7 evil spirits here, Aduz said with lingering fear. Luckily, you two came together. Otherwise, I'd be in trouble. Aduz didn't know magic, nor did he have mana. He relied purely on his equipment to fight evil spirits, so his abilities were very limited. Therefore, his abilities were very limited. If his equipment was useless, then he was no different from an ordinary person. One ran away, Crown said. Mr. Aduz, is it done? Leon pushed the door open and entered. He'd heard a strange howl from the room. It was chilling, but now that it had finally calmed down, Leon couldn't help but push the door open and ask. It's done, Aduz said. Crown said from beside Aduz. Aduz, is it good to lie like this? Didn't one run away? Anyway, that kid won't dare to come back, Dylas said. If he dares to appear again, I'll eat him. Were you going to eat? Just then, Leon's tone turned strange. His eyes glowed green. Mr. Lion, what are you talking about? Aduz was surprised. Did he hear what Crown and Dylas were saying? Suddenly, Leon pounced at Aduz and grabbed him by the neck. Let go, let go. Aduz wasn't young anymore. He couldn't compare to Leon, who was young and strong. He was about to suffocate. Crown and Dylas realized something was wrong and hurried over to help. But just as they touched Leon, Leon waved his arm and sent Crown and Dylas flying. Scram! Oh no, he's been possessed. Just then, 2 people in black clothes came in from outside the door. Knock, knock. What are you doing? You're disturbing our boss. Without thinking, Crown and Dylas burrowed into the bodies of these 2 people. Then, it pounced on Leon, who was possessed by a ghost. The 2 bodyguards of Dominic were unlucky to have barged in without a plan. In the end, before he could figure out anything, he was possessed by Crown and Dylas. But even so, Crown and Dylas were still no match for the possessed Leon. Damn it, what the hell are you? Crown was sent flying with a kick, while Dylas was punched to the ground. Being possessed by an evil spirit ghost would not actually increase the host's strength. However, because he could use his body without any worries, he would be able to display a higher combat power. However, his performance was still within the normal range, and he would not suddenly become a Superman. However, Leon, who was possessed by a ghost, displayed an unusually terrifying strength. You dare to kill my ghost servant. All of you will die. Die, all of you. Aduz kicked Lion's lower body, but Lion was unmoved. He punched Aduz in the chest. Aduz was beaten until he spat out blood. Crown and Dylas pounced again. However, the difference in power made them helpless. At this moment, Leon had become too terrifying. Holophan, did you really send people down? Why is it still so noisy down there? I sent Jamie and Donald. Did these 2 bastards go to the wrong floor? Follow me down. Dominic stood up. Dominic, your leg. I'm not crippled. Follow me. I have to teach the bastards down there a lesson. You guys, follow me too. Holophan was worried that if there was any conflict later, he and Dominic would be at a disadvantage, so he called all the bodyguards. When they reached the 18th floor and got out of the elevator, they saw someone fly out of the room in front. Then, another 2 flew out. They were none other than Holophan's bodyguards. Jamie, Donald, what are you 2 bastards doing? Just then, Leon walked out of the room with Aduz, who was on the brink of death, in his hand. Lion's entire body emitted a violent aura. "Who are you?" Dominic shouted. A cruel smile appeared on Lion's face. Leaving the dying Aduz behind, he kicked him again. Then he lunged at Dominic. Dominic jumped in fright. "Protect me!" However, his bodyguards couldn't stop the crazed Lion at all. Each of Lion's attacks was filled with violence. Soon, Dominic's bodyguards were all lying on the ground. Then, Lion turned to attack Dominic and Holofin. "Don't kill me! Don't kill me! I have money! I have money!" Dominic screamed in fear. Lion suddenly stopped. A strange smile appeared on his face. "Do you have money? How much can you give me?" $100,000. I'll give you $100,000. "Don't hurt me." Lion pointed at the bodyguards on the ground. His fingers twisted. Some of them were bent 30 degrees to the back of his hand. Dominic and Holofin felt chills down their spines. This definitely wasn't something a human could do. Just then, an injured bodyguard was pulled up uncontrollably. It was as if a hand was controlling him. "No, no, save me, Mr. Dominic." Dominic didn't understand what was happening. Then, he saw the bodyguard take out a gun and point it at his own head. "No, no, no." The bodyguard was terrified. Bang! Dominic and Holofin's legs turned to jelly. What exactly was going on? It was too strange. Why would the bodyguard shoot himself? "Do you think your life is only worth $100,000? 1 million, 1 million, Dominic yelled. "Good. If I don't see the transfer in an hour, you'll all go to hell." Crown and Dillas dragged Aduz and ran. Suddenly, Holofin yelled, "They're running away." Just then, Dominic's bodyguards all stood up again under Lion's control. They all pointed their guns at the front of the corridor. Bang, bang, bang. After a series of gunshots, Crown, Dillas, and Aduz were covered in bloody bullet holes. Fortunately, Crown and Dillas didn't feel any pain. This body wasn't theirs, so they dragged Aduz and rushed into the elevator. When the elevator door closed, they thought they were safe. Chapter 885. President. Something happened to Aduz. What happened to Aduz? I remember he went to exorcise a demon, right? Did he run into a tough guy? Chun Zhao didn't think too much about it. Aduz had said before that it was a regular evil spirit. Regular evil spirits have limited damage, so Chun Zhao didn't think too much about it. He's in emergency right now. His injuries are serious. He fell from the 10th floor in the elevator and has multiple gunshot wounds and contusions. Chun Zhao froze. "Which hospital is he in?" "Chantilly Hospital," Wes said. "I'll go right now." Chun Zhao had always disliked his identity as the president and the supernatural organization. But when something really happened to his subordinates, Chun Zhao couldn't stay out of it. No matter how much he disliked them, they were his own people. Behind closed doors, he could say whatever he wanted. Beating or scolding was his own business. But if they were hurt by an outsider, he couldn't be nice. When Chun Zhao arrived at the hospital, everyone from the organization was there. They gathered at the door of the emergency room with a serious expression. Crown and Dillas were there too. Chun Zhao remembered that they'd gone out with the Aduz. "You two, tell me what's going on." Dillas and Crown told the whole story. Everyone gathered there. Dillas and Crone were trembling and huddled together. All the members of the organization were furious. Only Chun Zhao didn't say anything. The more Chun Zhao didn't say anything, the more afraid they were. Right now, Chun Zhao was like a volcano waiting to erupt. He could erupt at any time. "Before we catch the real culprit, cancel the vacation and year-end bonus. Catch the culprit even if we have to turn all of Los Angeles upside down." "President, the culprit is an evil spirit, right?" Wes looked at Chun Zhao carefully. "You rely on your brain to make a living. Think about it. Would an evil spirit stop attacking when that person says he'll pay? Only people need money. The one controlling the hotel manager isn't an evil spirit, but a spiritualist." Just then, the door to the emergency room opened. Two doctors walked out of the surgery room. When they saw Chun Zhao, they were stunned. They knew Chun Zhao. He wasn't a doctor from this hospital. He was the Demon King here. Chun Zhao had many privileges here. Not that he could get any medical treatment here. It was because Chun Zhao could touch any patient at will. Chun Zhao had dealt with Chantilly many times. Therefore, they had a better understanding of the situation here. Many doctors here knew Chun Zhao too, such as the two in front of them. Mr. Chun. Two doctors walked up to him. I want to know how the person inside is doing. Right leg comminuted fracture, left thoracic cavity damaged, 3 ribs pierced through the lung. But in time to save him, his life is no longer in danger, and his vital signs are stable. Although Adu's injuries were severe, and he had many injuries, he had already recovered. Even the 2 emergency doctors were surprised that Adu's was able to pull through. Furthermore, there were no permanent injuries, which was a very miraculous result. Chun Zhao heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like he didn't have to go to the surgery room anymore. Can we go in and see him? He's still unconscious. He'll need at least 3 days to wake up. Even if he wakes up, he'll be very weak and probably won't be able to speak. Chun Zhao nodded. Thank you. All right, let's disperse. Dyla's Crown, you two stay behind. When everyone left, Dylan and Crown knelt before Chun Zhao in fear. President, please forgive us. We were wrong. Get up, all of you. I don't blame you. Chun Zhao kicked Dylan and Crown away. Don't kneel in public. That's rude. Although they were both spiritual bodies, Chun Zhao still felt very awkward. President, you're not going to punish us? Shut up. Just then, Fer walked over from the corridor. From afar, she saw Chun Zhao standing at the door of the emergency room. He seemed to be talking to someone, but there was no one before him. Could it be that this fellow was mentally unstable? Chun, what are you doing? Hey, Fer, why are you here? I'm working here. Why are you asking me why I'm here? I should be the one asking you this question. Why are you here? My friend's in the hospital. I'm here to take a look. Why were you talking to yourself just now? I've been acting in a movie recently, so I'm practicing my lines. Don't think that there's something wrong with my brain, and don't think that I have a split personality. The last time I was practicing my lines, a psychiatrist next to me just happened to think that I'm crazy. I didn't say anything. I'm busy. I'll leave now. Okay. Who's your friend? I'll help you take care of him when I'm free. He's still in the ICU. His name is Adu's. If he wakes up, call me. Okay. Chun Zhao walked out of the hospital with Dylan and Crown beside him. You too. Do you remember the evil spirit that controlled the hotel manager? Do you have any characteristics? Eyes. That evil spirit's eyes are green, Dylan said first. Also, after he controlled the hotel manager, his power was terrifying. He was like a monster. Panic filled Dominic and Holofen's faces. They realized that their bodyguard's eyes were all glowing green, just like the hotel manager who'd been controlled earlier. Sir, I've already given you the money. Why are you here? Dominic and Holofen were truly terrified. They didn't know what kind of person they were facing. Perhaps it wasn't even human. This guy could control people. First, one of their bodyguards committed suicide. Then, the hotel manager jumped from the 18th floor. I don't have any bad intentions. I just want to say that if you need anything, you can find me. Of course, as long as you can pay. Dominic and Holofen exchanged glances. Holofen asked, Sir, what should we call you? You can call me Chanin. I'm a puppeteer. Sir, you can control people to do anything, right? Ordinary people like you. I can make you do anything. Then can you control a doctor? I need him to treat me. What's his name? Where does he live? I don't know. Chapter 886. Holofen, what are you waiting for? Dominic shouted. Yes. I'll go right now. Mr. Charnon, may I know how much it costs to control this person and treat me? Does he have to die? Charnon asked. Dominic's eyes flashed. He seemed to be hesitating. Of course, Holofen immediately shouted. Let him die a horrible death. $2 million, Charnon said. Dominic wanted to object, but when he saw the green eyes of the bodyguards, he swallowed his words. His heart was bleeding, but in order to treat his leg as soon as possible, this bit of money was like feeding a dog. Dominic had thought about spending a few $1 million to treat Chun Zhao anyway. As for Chen Zhao's life or death, he didn't care. Then let me know when you find that person's information. Mr. Charnan, how can we find you? You call this number? The entire supernatural organization had gone crazy. His bonus was gone, and so was his vacation. How could this be? If they couldn't find the culprit, there would be no bonus or vacation. Everyone's heart was burning with anger. Aduz was also a part of the organization. The last time Chen Zhao was this angry was when Mor and Morid were attacked by his family. Everyone knew that Chen Zhao was really angry this time. However, no matter how they searched, they couldn't find any clues. The members gathered for a meeting. Do you have any clues? There are no clues at all. Now Moer and his doppelganger are searching the streets with magic power testing equipment. However, this method was like looking for a needle in a haystack. It might also cause unnecessary trouble. After all, if they found a person with magic and got questioned for no reason, it might be fine if the person had a good temper. If the person had a bad temper, they would probably fight on the spot. Call Moore back. Don't let him be so reckless, Gaius said. And it's dangerous for him to search alone. How can we find him if we don't do this? First, find out what spell he used, Gaius said. Everyone's gaze fell on Alice. She was a magic encyclopedia. There were countless magic books in her bloodline. Let me search, said Eris, closing her eyes. After a while, Alice opened her eyes again. Right, other than green eyes, what other characteristics are there? Unparalleled strength, control others. Green eyes, immense strength, ability to control others. Alice closed her eyes again. A minute later, she opened them again. Found similar information. There are about 30 related spells. Right, there's also the ghost servant. Dillas and Crown were also listening. As one of the people involved, they could not stay out of it. Alice searched again. Finally, Alice found it. Puppet magic. Alice said, first a ghostly servant puppet is created. Then, through branding magic, the ghostly servant is combined with the spellcaster. Just like a marionette, the ghostly servant can enter the body of a person without magic power at will. The controlled person will be able to exert power far beyond what they should have. However, it will cause great harm to the body. The spellcaster cannot be within 100 meters of the ghostly servant. Gaius said, in other words, at the time of the incident, the spellcaster was actually in the hotel. Is there any more information? You can see the strength of the ghostly servant controlled by the puppeteer from its eyes. Its eyes emit green light, so it's the lowest level ghostly servant puppet. Next is crimson light, so it's a high-level ghostly servant. There's also a type of puppet monster that emits black light. Gaia continued, any more information? Puppeteers must have their own puppets with them. In other words, if we find a spiritualist traveling alone, it probably won't be the puppeteer we're looking for. We mainly look for those with more than one spiritualist. Then we'll look in this direction. We can't go alone. We need at least a team of 3, Gaia said. If we find a puppeteer, don't act rashly. Inform the other teams immediately or Chin directly. Chan, what are you doing? There's a party at my house. Come and drink. Raspa called Chen Zhao. I'm not in a good mood. I don't want to go, Chen Zhao said. What's not good? After a few glasses of wine, you'll forget all the unpleasant things. I don't want to go. Darling, did someone ask you to go out and play? If that's the case, then go ahead. Just then, Fei Lai walked over. She was fully equipped and even pushed a stroller. Little Jerlin was in the stroller. Are you going out? Chen Zhao asked. Yes, I'm going to take Jerlin shopping. Oh, then be careful, Chen Zhao said. Black Ma, White Ma, go shopping with Fei Lai. Black Ma and White Ma immediately ran to Fei Lai's side excitedly. Their favorite thing to do was to go shopping. Chen Zhao was the only one left at home. He wanted to play with Jerlin and then spend some time with Fei Lai, but they'd both gone shopping. Feeling bored, Chen Zhao also drove to Raspa's house. When he reached Raspa's house, Chen Zhao was stopped. The security guard at the door was new and didn't know Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao also drove a taxi and didn't have an invitation, so he stopped him at the door. After a call, Paul ran out and let Chen Zhao in. The security guard looked at Chen Zhao with a bitter expression. Were all rich people so pretentious nowadays? Who would know that you were a VIP if you drove a small truck? Chen Zhao was also dumbfounded by Rasfa's guests. He couldn't be bothered to talk to these strangers. He grabbed a bottle of wine and sat on the beach to bask in the sun. Hi. A girl in a bikini walked over. Her lower body was completely covered. She had long, wavy blonde hair and a pretty face with some baby fat. The girl looked at Chen Zhao. Are you alone? Yeah. Do we know each other? Chen Zhao asked, glancing at the girl. No, I don't know anyone here, the girl said. But we can get to know each other. I'm Brandon. Oh. Shouldn't you introduce yourself too? Chen Zhao, from China. Why are you alone? Same as you. I don't know anyone here, Chen Zhao said casually and downed a glass of wine. It's so noisy, Brandon said. I don't like the environment here either. Did you come to this party with Mom and Dad? Chapter 887. Judging from her figure, her 36D breasts were indeed a sign of maturity. But what's with this baby face? Pour me a glass of wine. You're really an adult? Chen Zhao was very doubtful. Then who did you come with? Asked the big-chested Brandon. I snuck in myself. Do you believe me? Brandon really did believe him. Looking at his clothes, he indeed didn't look like a guest here. How did you get in? I went around the beach, Chen Zhao said. If I go around the Pebble Beach, it's easy. I can get some food and a bottle of wine. There's food and wine and I can trick some girls. Then why are you telling me the truth? Don't you know I drugged the wine? Pooh. You really drugged it? Eh? What position do you like? Brandon screamed and ran away. After 2 steps, Brandon realized something was wrong. She turned to look at the smirking Chen Zhao. You lied to me? That depends on how you define the word. Do you believe that I'll get people to catch you? No. Even if the people from the manor come, they'll just throw me out. I've eaten and drunk the wine. What can they do to me? Brandon was speechless. She'd never seen someone so shameless. Just then, an old woman ran over. Is that your mother over there? No, it's my manager, Ms. Lansky. Chen Zhao looked at the old woman and knew that she wasn't a good person. Lance ran in front of Brandon and said in an overbearing manner, Brandon, why are you still here chatting with irrelevant people? I brought you to this party not to have fun. Come with me. Brandon shrugged helplessly. She looked back at Chen Zhao and waved her hand. It's a pity that we're already married. Otherwise, this chick would really be able to get her hands on us. Chen Zhao found it a pity, but Fei Lai was still pregnant at home. If he messed around outside, he'd be a scumbag. Brandon followed Lansky back to the mansion. There were already many guests. Lansky's gaze wandered around. Finally, her eyes lit up. Stephen. However, Stephen was talking to another actor next to him at the moment. Lansky glanced at the confused Brandon. Go up and greet Mr. Stephen. But I don't know Mr. Stephen, Brandon said hesitantly. Don't be so long-winded. Who doesn't know each other? Take this cup of wine. Brandon was a little afraid of Lance. He walked toward Stephen obediently and stopped a few times when he was a few meters away from Stephen. Hello, Mr. Stephen. Brandon had just opened his mouth to greet Lansky when Lansky purposely pushed him from behind. Startled, Brandon swung his hand forward and spilled the wine on Stephen. Stephen's face immediately darkened, but it was not convenient for him to flare up in public. He glared at Brandon and turned to leave. Mr. Stephen. Yes, Stephen didn't even give Brandon a chance to apologize. Under the guidance of the servant, he went to change his clothes. You can't even handle such a small matter. Lance looked at Brandon in disdain. What the hell are you doing? Brandon was thin-skinned to begin with, and he had no experience in such situations. Do you know what will happen to you if you offend Mr. Stephen? Well, what will happen to me? Don't even think about working in Hollywood anymore. One word from Stephen, and even the smallest film company won't hire you to make a movie. Remember that A-list actor, Libel? He's the best portrayal. Brandon's face paled in fear, and he was about to cry. Of course, she knew how pitiful Libel was. In her eyes, Libel was a big star. But because he offended Stephen, he ended up with no film. What's more, he was just an unknown actor. I know a film company. Maybe they can help. Aren't they afraid of offending Mr. Stephen? Come with me. I'll introduce you to the producer. Brandon followed Lance to a small courtyard. A few people were sitting there. One of them was a man in his 40s, and the others were sexy women. They were like stars surrounding the moon, surrounding the man. "Hi, Mr. Holmeston," Lance greeted him. Holmeston raised his head and glanced at Brandon, who was behind Lance. Holmeston's eyes lit up. "Hi, miss, come and sit here." Lance tugged at Brandon, and Brandon reluctantly sat beside Holmeston. Holmeston's hand was already on Brandon's bare shoulder. Brandon squirmed. "Mr. Holmeston, what do you think of Brandon? Is she suitable to be an actress in your company?" A smile appeared on Holmeston's face. "Is her name Brandon?" "Of course. My company is preparing a few movies. As long as Brandon signs, she can be the female lead." Shock appeared in Brandon's eyes. She could be the female lead? This was something she had always dreamed of. But on second thought, it didn't seem right. Even the big six of Hollywood couldn't prepare a few movies at once. Moreover, they had only seen her once, and they were already giving her the female lead. So, Brandon was immediately alarmed. Although Brandon had a baby face, her brain was not as slow as it seemed. "I'm sorry, I can't be the female lead yet. Thank you, Mr. Holmeston, but I still want to start as a supporting character." "It's fine if you want a supporting character. It's just a matter of saying the word." Holmeston laughed out loud and snapped his fingers. A woman beside him took out a contract from a briefcase beside her. But she handed the contract to Lance first. Lance only glanced at it casually. "Mr. Holmeston is so generous. Brandon, hurry up and thank him. Your salary in Hollywood is less than $20,000, but Mr. Holmeston is offering you $100,000 per movie." Brandon was even more suspicious. She was very clear about her salary. Although she was a newcomer in Hollywood, she had graduated from USC Film School. She had some understanding of the rules in Hollywood. She hadn't proven herself. She didn't even have a memorable role. Why was he offering her a high salary? "Ms. Lance, can I see the contract?" Chapter 888. Lance folded the contract and placed it in front of Brandon. Brandon wanted to take the contract, but Lance grabbed it. "Brandon, don't you trust me?" "Ms. Lance, I want to see everything. Think carefully. This is a great opportunity." Lance unwillingly let go of the contract. The first thing Brandon saw was the name of the company, Farrah Pictures. Farrah Pictures' address, San Fernando Valley. Brandon immediately understood why Holmeston gave him the lead role the first time he saw him. Why he could get $100,000 for a movie. Also, the contract clearly stated the content and scale of the movie. In the film industry, other contracts could be lied to, but the content of the movie couldn't be lied to. The content and scale of the shoot had to be written in the contract. The so-called fake contract in the novel to deceive a young girl did not exist in reality. At least it couldn't be done in America. If the contract didn't mention the content and scale, the actor had the right to refuse. "I refuse." Brandon threw the contract down and stood up, ready to leave. Lance stopped him. "Brandon, now is not the time to throw a tantrum. Ms. Lance, is this how you push your artists into the fire pit?" "Brandon, think about it. How many $1 million can you earn in your life? As long as you sign the contract, you'll earn $1 million in 3 months. Lance didn't say the other part. She could take a 30% commission. In other words, she didn't have to do anything, and she could take 30%. The agency would take another 30%. This was the rule in Hollywood. Famous stars had to sign new contracts. The more famous they were, the less the agent would take. For those A-listers or super A-listers, their agents would only take 5% or even less. Lance didn't need to train a superstar. She just needed to keep introducing her artists to Holmeston. For example, Brandon would never be able to make it to the top after one movie. He had a way to control her all the time and let her continue to shoot one film after another. Brandon turned to leave, but Lance grabbed him. "Don't think about going anywhere if you don't sign the contract. Ms. Lance, if you don't let go, I'll call for help." "Brandon, don't be so shameless. I was the one who helped you rent the place you are currently living in. I was also the one who paid the rent. If you refuse, don't even think about staying in Hollywood. You will have to sleep on the streets tonight." Brandon was also unable to restrain his anger. He went up and slapped Ranchi's face. Old witch, you will regret this. Lansky covered his face as he watched Brandon leave. Holston had been watching from the side. Ranky, I want this woman. Get her for me. Yes, Mr. Holmeston. I'll take care of her. Brandon left the small courtyard. The more he thought about it, the more wronged he felt. In the distance, Chun Zhao was still sitting on the beach. Brandon walked toward Chun Zhao. Chun Zhao looked up and saw that Brandon had returned. But from the looks of it, she seemed to have just cried. Brandon, did you drop your phone in the toilet? Biting his lower lip, Brandon sat beside Chun Zhao. I was tricked by that old witch. She wants me to go to San Fernando Valley to film. Chun Zhao looked Brandon up and down. Are you going? If you go, I'll buy your DVD. Brandon gritted his teeth. You're all bad people. Just then, Lansky came again. Brandon, come with me. Do you think I'll be tricked by you again? Brandon looked at Lansky in disgust. You don't have to come with me. As long as you have $500,000, Lansky said. Why should I take out $500,000? In the contract you signed with the company, there's a rule. If an artist doesn't cooperate with the company's work opportunities and treats them negatively, the company has the right to pursue legal responsibility and compensate for the resources and losses the company has invested. When did I treat my work negatively? If I say you do, you do, Lansky said arrogantly. Lansky said arrogantly, come back with me and sign that contract. You will also have a chance to be a big star in San Fernando Valley. This sentence could only trick young girls. Perhaps some women who dared to come to Hollywood were stupid, but they were definitely in the minority. If they accepted a film in San Fernando Valley, they'd be far away from mainstream movies forever. For an old fox like Lansky, it was too easy to control an artist. Before signing Brandon, she'd already made up her mind. That was why she'd set a trap in the contract. According to Brandon's development in the past 6 months, her chances of becoming famous were too low. Hollywood never lacked beauties. Brandon wasn't a one-in-a-million beauty either. Sending Brandon to the San Fernando Valley to make a film would bring him far more benefits than being a third-rate or fourth-rate star. Unless Brandon became an A-list star, she wouldn't be able to bring much money to Lansky. Rather than letting Brandon fight for a hopeless future, of course, it was more tempting to have short-term benefits. Anyway, I won't sign that contract. Brandon was determined. That's not up to you. Chun Zhao felt like he was watching a play. It was like a pimp forcing a girl into prostitution in ancient times. Just then, Holmeston arrived with 2 bodyguards. Lansky, you're still not done? Give me some more time, Lansky said hurriedly. I'll be done soon. No need to be so troublesome. Transfer her contract to my company. Lansky couldn't help but smile. Then the price, $300,000. Brandon's face paled immediately. There were many ways for a rich person to deal with a poor person. For example, this kind of direct purchase of the management contract, which was the so-called transfer of artists. If both parties were on equal footing or the artist was powerful, this method clearly wouldn't work. But for an artist like Brandon who owed the company money and name, the company could easily sell her to someone else. Just as Lansky said, if Brandon wanted to terminate the contract, she'd have to pay the debt that she didn't have first. You can't do this. This is fraud, Brandon said with her limited legal knowledge. You can't transfer me to another company without my permission. Chapter 889. Miss Brandon, can you come with me now? I think we still have some contracts to sign. After all, our company cares a lot about new artists. Holmeston reached out to grab Brandon, but another hand grabbed Brandon's waist first. Brandon froze. Turning around, she saw that it was Chun Zhao. Sir, let go of our company's artist. Holmeston looked at Chun Zhao. Your company's artist? Chun Zhao looked down at Brandon. Are you their artist? Brandon lowered her head. She didn't dare to reply. Yes or no? To her, these were all consequences that she could not bear. Sir, you want to steal my woman? Do you know who I am? No. Let me introduce myself. Chun Zhao shrugged. Holmeston's face darkened. Chun Zhao's words made him feel insulted. Do you believe that I'll make the women in your family appear in some movie scene in San Fernando Valley? Then do you believe that I'll make you walk out on your knees? Chun Zhao's expression turned cold. Then I'll see how you'll make me walk out on my knees, Holmeston said with a cold smile. Just then, a mocking voice came from behind. I'll give you $100. I bet this guy will leave on his knees. Everyone turned around and saw that Rasfa and Stephen were walking over. Then I'll give you 200, Stephen said. I bet he won't even be able to kneel. Mr. Stephen. Mr. Rasfa. How did you? Holmeston's expression was strange. Did Chun Zhao know Rasfa and Stephen? Rasfa, you know him? I'm not familiar with him, but I remember that his mother's name is Darlene. She was pretty when she was young. Rasfa's voice was rather loud. Really? Holmeston's expression turned awkward. After all, no one would be happy to have someone talk about their mother in front of them. But more importantly, he couldn't offend Rasfa. Rasfa was the CEO of PLM Films. Holmeston, on the other hand, was only in the San Fernando Valley for porn. He was naturally shorter than Rasfa. Moreover, PLM was one of the 6 major Hollywood companies. The two parties didn't seem to have any intersection, but most of their distributors and channels overlapped. Some distributors and distributors might not only release regular movies, but also some movies from the San Fernando Valley. What if Rasfa told the distributors and distributors to choose PLM's movies or his company's movies? Therefore, those distributors and distributors would undoubtedly choose PLM movies. After all, there were many film companies in the San Fernando Valley, and Holmeston Films was not a big company. Rasfa could deal with Holmeston easily, just like how Holmeston could deal with Brandon easily. As for Stephen, he might not be as rich as Rasfa, nor was he in a high position. However, his influence was probably greater than that of the president. If Stephen wanted to deal with Holmeston, all he had to do was say something in the media. The consequences would be disastrous. No one wanted to provoke Stephen. Brandon, on the other hand, was shocked. She did not understand why Rasfa and Stephen would stand up for her. Moreover, he had splashed the wine on Stephen. Mr. Rasfa, did I offend you? What did you do in my house and at my party? Rasfa's eyes were like torches. Rasfa knew exactly what Holmeston had done in his territory. In the past, he was too lazy to argue with Holmeston. But now, Holmeston had actually offended Chun Zhao. As Chun Zhao's staunch allies, Rasfa and Stephen would definitely not be indifferent anymore. Mr. Rasfa, I apologize for what I did before. I promise I won't do it again. One should lower one's head when needed. Holmeston felt that it was not shameful to lower one's head to Rasfa. What else? You still haven't apologized to my friend. Rasfa looked at Holmeston. Him? Holmeston's face darkened even more. What right does he have? Stephen, how many years do you get for selling and tricking women in America? Chun Zhao asked. As long as you're convicted, at least 10 years, Stephen said. Contract fraud is also considered as selling and tricking women. Chun Zhao received a satisfactory answer. Mr. Holmeston, I think you'll have a pleasant 10 years in prison. I don't have a contract to buy her, so what you said doesn't work. Cold sweat beaded on Holmeston's forehead. Then you'd better pray that this is your first time. If you've done the same thing before, I can send you to jail, Stephen said. Mr. Stephen, Mr. Rasfa, do you really have to kill me? Holmeston gritted his teeth. You said something you shouldn't have, my child. Rasfa smiled like a benevolent elder. Everyone should be responsible for what they do and what they say. Sir, I apologize for what I said just now. I'm sorry. Chun Zhao smiled. How about this? Go to the sea, swim past the buoy, and then swim back. Then I'll forgive you. Holmeston looked at the sea that Chun Zhao was pointing at. The buoy was about 150 meters in the sea. It wasn't far. Really? Holmeston thought that he had good stamina. This distance wouldn't trouble him at all. Of course. Mr. Stephen, Mr. Rasfa, do you mean what he said? Of course. Holmeston took off his shirt and rushed down the beach, jumping into the sea. But Holmeston didn't swim for long before he felt something bite his leg and drag him into the water. Seeing Holmeston's appearance, Rasfa and Stephen knew what had happened to him. This beach had always been plagued by sharks, but after Amon's arrival, all the sharks disappeared. Other than sharks, there was nothing else that could attack Holmeston on this beach. Oh no, the boss is in trouble. Seeing this, Holmeston's 2 bodyguards immediately wanted to go into the sea to save him. There seemed to be sharks on this beach, Chun Zhao said calmly. You too? Are you sure you want to go into the water? Chun Zhao's words dispelled the two bodyguards' thoughts. Brandon looked at Chun Zhao. Right now, she only felt that Chun Zhao was the demon. He knew that there were sharks here, but Holmeston still went into the water. He was simply trying to kill Holmeston. Chun, don't kill him, Rasfa said. Chapter 890. Stephen and Rasfa could see it too. If Chun Zhao wanted to kill Holmeston, he would have died long ago. He'd been floating for more than 10 minutes, but he wasn't dead yet. Chun Zhao indeed didn't want to kill him. He only wanted to take half of his life. Finally, maybe Holmeston found a chance, but he swam toward the shore like crazy. Amon didn't continue chasing him in the water. Holmeston finally swam to the shore. He lay on the ground, panting. Chun Zhao stood before Holmeston. Looks like you didn't complete my request. There's a monster in the water, a monster. Holmeston couldn't see clearly what it was in the water. Amon was too big, and Holmeston was in a state of panic and fear. He only wanted to escape to the shore, so he didn't care about anything. He only knew that it was huge, really huge. Chun Zhao looked at Holmeston. Don't give me a reason. Chun Zhao looked up at Stephen and Rasfa. I want to know how to make him go bankrupt as soon as possible. Simple, Rasfa said. As long as his reputation goes bankrupt, the bank can force him to his death. What's his company called? Farah Films. Chun Zhao took out his phone and called Amira. Hey, Amira, help me check which banks Farah Films has taken loans from, okay? No need. I know this company. They've taken loans from our bank before. Oh, Amira, you're interested in these movies too? You actually know this film company. Because their boss once invited me to shoot a movie. Huh? So you agreed? Chun Zhao almost peed from laughing. What do you think? Amira's tone was cold. I'm curious why you agreed to give him a loan. Because he's willing to pay the highest interest rate. Then I'm warning you to collect the debt quickly. If you're late, it'll be bad debt, Chun Zhao said, chuckling. You have a grudge against him? Ha! Holmeston pounced at Chun Zhao with a roar. He took out a stone from somewhere and smashed it toward Chun Zhao's head. Ah! Chun Zhao screamed and fell to the ground, holding his head. Ah! Chun Zhao screamed and fell to the ground, clutching his head. My head! My head! I'm going to kill you! Kill you! Holmeston smashed Chun Zhao's body a few times. Suddenly, he came back to his senses. What did I do? Someone come quickly! Rasfa yelled. Capture him! Call the police! Call the police! The servants in the manor heard Rasfa's shout and immediately rushed over. Let me go! Let me go! I didn't mean it, Holmeston argued. Take him to the police station, Rasfa said, and call an ambulance. Stop screaming. Stephen walked up and kicked Chun Zhao. Asshole, you didn't act this well on set before. Chun Zhao moved his palm away and looked around. How was my acting? Rasfa went up to check on him. Chun, are you okay? You idiot. Think about it. If Chun couldn't even beat a piece of trash, how could he have fought those bandits? Rasfa thought about it and realized that he was indeed stupid. Both times Chun Zhao attacked, he had killed all the bandits. Many had died in his hands. He actually thought that Holmeston had hurt him. Chun Zhao looked at Brandon and Lanchi. Brandon, are you still going to be an artist under a company? Brandon immediately shook his head. Brandon looked like a naive and sweet girl. But in reality, she wasn't dumb at all. The man before her had made Holmeston bankrupt with a few moves. He might even go to jail. Clearly, Lanchi couldn't afford to offend him. If she didn't seize this chance to get rid of Lanchi, when would she? Bring me her contract. Chun Zhao looked at Lanchi. Right now, Lanchi was so scared that her limbs were cold. She could be strong in front of Brandon. But before Holmeston, she was only a brothel keeper. She didn't expect Chun Zhao to cripple Holmeston with a flip of his hand. She definitely didn't think that she could defeat Chun Zhao. The two Holmeston bodyguards were still standing there. They didn't know what to do. What are you looking at? Your boss is going to jail. Do you want to go too? Do you need me to arrange a room with him? Sir, I promise I won't tell anyone. Me too. At this time, the advantage of having connections came into play. With a call to the bank, Chen Zhao could make Holmeston want to die. Oh, did you call the ambulance? You're really hurt? I need to check. Personal injury and attempted murder, Chen Zhao said. Oh, send me to Chantilly Hospital. Brandon looked at Chen Zhao deeply. Ruthless, so ruthless. If he made Holmeston's company go bankrupt, he'd be sent to jail. After expressing his gratitude, Brandon left. Brandon was a woman who knew when to retreat. She was smart. Chen Zhao saw Yafen and Lucy in her. But compared to the two vixens, Brandon was much more inexperienced. A while later, the ambulance arrived. Seeing Chen Zhao covered in blood, For couldn't help but be stunned. Chun, what's wrong? I was beaten up. I'm seriously injured. I need treatment. For could tell from Chen Zhao's tone that he wasn't seriously injured at all. His bloody face did look scary, but his expression was so indifferent. He didn't look like someone who was injured at all. Then the ambulance took Chen Zhao away. For used alcohol to wash the blood off Chen Zhao's face, but she couldn't find any wounds. Where's your wound? Don't worry about where it is. Anyway, when we get to the hospital, you can check my injury. For's face darkened. Don't expect me to give you false testimony. Judging from Chen Zhao's attitude and the fact that he wanted to check his injury, he was clearly trying to trick her. I don't need you to give me false testimony. I just want the injury check. You're not injured, right? I know how to make it look like I'm injured. Even if I pass the hospital's check, I can get a report. Who on earth offended you? Someone who shoots porn, Chen Zhao said. For couldn't be bothered to cooperate, but she still followed Chen Zhao's request and sent him for the check. Especially the brain concussion and trauma examination that Chen Zhao had specified. For muttered to herself. She had no idea how that person had offended Chen Zhao. Chapter 891. Why aren't you going back? For looked at Chen Zhao, who was still sitting on the walkway. Not only that, but his head was also bandaged. There were even 2 drops of red liquid on the bandage. Are you afraid that people won't know your head is injured? I plan to stay here for 2 days. What kind of grudge do you have against that person? I don't know what you're talking about. Look at the bandage on my head. I have a concussion. I need to stay here for observation. Val rolled her eyes. To be able to say that so smoothly, you don't have a concussion, my ass. It wasn't her first day knowing Chen Zhao. She knew Chen Zhao like the back of her hand. Then why are you sitting here? Just then a nurse walked over. Mr. Chen, your hospitalization procedures have been completed. Please follow me. Thank you. Chen Zhao left with the nurse's help. For patted her head. She took out her phone and called Fei Lai. Fei Lai, aren't you going to control your man? What happened to Chen? He's in the hospital now. Hospital? Did he steal business from your hospital again? No, he's here to do business, For said. He's in the hospital now. Huh? Chen Sheng is sick? Or injured? No, he's just bored and wants to stay. Fei Lai was speechless. Dominic sat in the orthopedic consultation room. Holofin stood beside him. Mr. Dominic, your leg injury is very serious. It's been a while, and the wound is showing signs of infection. I suggest you stay in the hospital immediately. If I stay in the hospital, how long will it take for me to recover? At least 2 months. Plus, your injury is a bit complicated. Including the recovery period, it might take 3 months. What? 3 months? Dominic stood up abruptly. But when he moved, his thigh felt as if it was being pricked by needles. Doctor, does your hospital have any orthopedic specialists? Holofin asked. Dominic wants the best, the doctor answered calmly. Mr. Dominic, I'm the best orthopedic specialist in this hospital, the doctor answered calmly. He knew that the person before him was a famous football player in Europe. Thus, he was rather calm and restrained. There was another doctor who said that my injuries would heal in a month. That's impossible. The recovery period of a muscle strain takes a month. This involves a very complicated muscle growth rate. Although there are some special drugs that can speed up muscle growth, it's impossible to shorten the time by half. Moreover, the 2 months I gave you is already a very optimistic estimate. I want a world-class orthopedic expert. I don't think you're qualified. Dominic sounded very arrogant. The doctor said helplessly, Mr. Dominic, please go to other hospitals to try your luck. At least our hospital doesn't have a world-class orthopedic expert. Fuck, I told you not to get your hopes up in this rural hospital, Dominic said unhappily. Holofin helped Dominic out of the consultation room and saw Chen Zhao walking toward them. Chen Zhao was also supported by a nurse. His head was wrapped in bandages. He seemed to be heavily injured. Hey, isn't this Mr. Chin? What's wrong? Dominic walked over with a smile. None of your business. Chen Zhao glared at Dominic and Holofin. You're so injured and still don't know how to keep a low profile, Holofin said provocatively. Chen Zhao paused. Do you want to lie on the bed too? Holofin immediately stopped talking. He was really afraid that Chen Zhao would attack him. Let's go. He'll beg me sooner or later, Dominic said with a snort. Your brain must be damaged by the drugs. Do you think I'd beg you? Chen Zhao turned his head in disdain, ignoring the two. Holofin, call Mr. Charnan and tell him to come to the hospital, Dominic said. This is the hotel, right? Gaia looked up at the building where the hotel was. This is the biggest hotel in L.A. There are thousands of rooms. How do we find him? Just check the guests. If he's our target, he should have a few puppets with him. For our year-end bonus. For everyone's vacation. Seeing Gaia and the others enter, the manager immediately walked over. Hi, do you need a room? Everyone looked at West. We're the police, West said. Police? Is it because of the murder that happened here a few days ago? Yes. We suspect that the murderer might still be in the hotel, so we need to investigate the guests. How can we cooperate? The manager asked. Take out the guest list. We need to check it. Okay. The manager didn't suspect West's identity, mainly because the police had been investigating and collecting evidence in the past few days. The manager went to the front desk and took out the guest list. Is there anything else I can help you with? Sir, Gaia said, I'd like to ask if there's a rumor that your hotel is haunted. No, there's no such thing. Sir, we're not reporters or your competitors, Gaia said. We won't spread rumors. We just suspect that the incident might be related to the murderer and that it's an illusion created by the murderer. The manager hesitated. Finally, he admitted it and nodded. Indeed. When did it start? Last Thursday. Okay. Thank you for your cooperation. If there's anything else, we'll ask for your help again. If there's nothing else, I'll leave now. After the manager left, West asked in confusion, Gaia, does this news have anything to do with the person we're looking for? First, we can confirm that the puppeteer has a ghost servant. I suspect that he purposely left the ghost servant in the hotel after he checked in. That's why the haunting happened. So, we started investigating the day before last Thursday and have been here until today. That way, we can narrow down the scope. Everyone understood. If it were them, they would probably compare the rooms one by one. Many people. They stayed here for at least 8 days. Yes, there's a group of people here. Moore pointed at the screen of the computer and said there were 6 people in total, and they booked 2 rooms. One of them was a deluxe suite, and only 1 person lived in it. The other was an ordinary suite, and 5 people lived in it. That's it, Gaia said. Which room? 18th floor, room 501. It's a single room. The person staying there is called Chanong. Chapter 892. Everyone stood outside the door and exchanged glances. Gaia gestured. Jala kicked the door. I'll go in first. Gaia was still worried that they'd rush in first. After all, she wasn't sure what they'd encounter, so she, the thick-skinned one, should go first. 3, 2, 1. Gaia gestured a countdown. Jala kicked the door open. Gaia charged into the room. The person who was sitting on the sofa suddenly jumped up. Who are you? Everyone looked at the person before them. His eyes were glowing green. Your captor. Gaia's arm glowed red. Seeing Gaia's arm, the person turned and ran. Gaia immediately chased after him, but the person crashed into the glass on the wall. With a crash, the man smashed through the glass on the ground and fell outside. Everyone was stunned. They ran to the window and looked down. The person had fallen onto the road below, his body smashed to pieces. Dead? No, Giselle suddenly shouted. He's not a puppeteer, he's a puppet. Then what about the puppeteer? Oh no, we've been tricked, Gaia shouted. The puppeteer actually lives in the same room as the other puppets. He purposely separated them to make us think that the puppeteer lives here. Go to the 16th floor. But when Gaia and the others rushed to the 16th floor, they found that there was no one in the suite. Damn, the puppeteer got away. Maybe he hasn't gone far. Let's chase. A taxi stopped by the roadside. The driver looked at the 5 people in the car. 4 of them were wearing sunglasses. Sir, my car is small. It can't fit 5 people. Sitting in the passenger seat, Charnon took out a stack of money and handed it to the driver. This is for you, Chantilly Hospital. Thank you. Seeing how generous they were, the driver didn't say anything else. Charnon's phone rang again. It was from Dominic. Picking it up, Charnon said, I'll be there soon. From the rearview mirror, he could see Gaia and the others rushing out of the hotel. Charnon's lips curled up. He had long since gotten used to the process of being teased like a cat playing with a mouse. But no one had ever been able to catch him. It was because of his cautiousness and carefulness. On the road in front of the hotel, Gaia and the others split up and searched on both sides. After searching for a long time, he still couldn't find anyone, so he could only return to the front of the hotel. How is it? No, not at all. Everyone was disappointed. This was the closest they had ever come to finding the real culprit. But after this, it would not be so easy to find that puppeteer again. By the way, there are surveillance cameras in the hotel lobby. You can watch them. Everyone returned to the hotel, found the lobby manager, and retrieved the surveillance footage. These are the 5 people living in room 501 on the 16th floor. The lobby manager pointed at the people in the surveillance screen. Thank you. After Gaia sent the manager away, he said, among the 5 of them, only the dark-skinned one isn't wearing sunglasses. The other 4 are wearing sunglasses. This person is the puppeteer. Keep a copy of the puppet master's photo on everyone's phone. After sending the message, Gaia's phone rang. Gaia, who is this man? Why are you sending me a stranger's photo? This is the real culprit who hurted-doos the puppeteer. We found that his registered name is Chanin, but we don't know if that's his real name. Okay, by the way, where are you now? In the hospital. Seeing a patient? No, I'm in the hospital. Don't joke around. You're sick? Actually, I was beaten up and sent to the hospital. This is even funnier than the previous one. Someone beat you up and sent you to the hospital? Gaia listened to Chun Zhao's voice. It was full of energy. He didn't sound sick or injured at all. Okay, I'm just bored, so I came to the hospital for 2 days. With that, he sent a selfie to Gaia. Gaia burst out laughing when she saw it. Everyone gathered around and saw Chun Zhao's selfie on Gaia's phone. They all looked at each other. West yelled in shock. The president is injured? Who did it? No way. Did some terrifying existence come to LA? Even the president is injured. How terrifying is it? Is it too late for me to leave the supernatural organization now? Gaia looked at the embarrassed people. If you go visit Chun with flowers and fruits, maybe he'll be in a good mood and give you your year-end bonus. That makes sense. Then let's go visit the president now. Everyone rushed to the hospital in a swarm. Chun Zhao had only been in the hospital for less than half a day, but he already regretted it. How could he be so stupid to really stay in the hospital? Whatever. No matter what, he'd already done the admission procedures. He had to stay for at least 1 night. But it was so boring. He really wanted to find someone to teach him a lesson. Chun Zhao walked out of the single room and pushed the infusion rack. Whistling, he strolled along the corridor of the hospital. Just then, he saw 4 in front of the medical counter. She seemed to be talking to the medical staff. Hi, 4. 4 glanced at Chun Zhao and then ignored him. She turned to leave. Chun Zhao immediately chased after her. Are you done eating? My treat. Are you bored? You can go home right now. Falico's still home. No, I have to stay for 1 night. At least 1 night. How much do you hate that person? Not too much, but I've already planned his life, Chun Zhao said. First, I'll bankrupt his company and then send him to prison. I'll find a few big black men and have them stay in the same room as him. Chun Zhao's spittle flew everywhere. For was really not interested in listening anymore. Chun Zhao immediately chased after her. Where did you go? Didn't you say you'd treat me to dinner? Fine. What do you want to eat? For brought Chen Zhao to the hospital's cafeteria. It was a buffet. Four watched as Chen Zhao placed the entire plate of spaghetti on the table. She was speechless. Holding her forehead, she looked at Chen Zhao. Are you sure you can finish it? Of course. Do you want to bet? $100. Just then, a patient at a nearby table pushed $100 over. I bet you can't finish it. Chen Zhao stood up. Anyone else want to bet? Let's see if I can finish this plate of spaghetti. More and more people gathered around Chen Zhao and Four. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.